Hey everyone, happy new year and welcome back to a new video. So today we're going to be talking about Lauren Chen and some of her anti-feminist content on YouTube.
Hollywood liberal tears. I had forgotten how tasty you were.
Let's talk about how feminism has demonized motherhood to the point that it's now actually causing an existential crisis for Western society. Are you going to be cooking for him? Are you going to be cleaning for him? Are you going to be baking for him? But it's like, do you listen to yourselves or your fellow feminists? Because it absolutely is anti-family.
Lauren is someone whose name I've heard thrown around quite a bit, but I hadn't actually watched any of her videos before embarking on making this video. Apparently her old username on YouTube used to be Roaming Millennial, which is a little bit more memorable to me, but again, still don't think I watched any of her stuff while she was going by that name. Apparently she is known to cover political topics from a Christian conservative perspective, so basically the opposite of me. According to her YouTube wiki page, Chen identifies as a Christian nationalist and claims that Christianity is the only path away from degeneracy. She has also collaborated with the controversial Christian duo Girl Defined. Chen claims the duo do an amazing job and are a great resource.
I have really stinky feet.
That's true.
We are both older than our husbands. I married a man shorter than me. There's that. We already, didn't we say that? No, we said younger. You can move your tongue really fast. Oh my gosh. Show him. Like, I'm really slow. Like, this is a really dumb thing, but you know, like, little challenges. Like, I'm not very good at, like, moving really fast. She can move things, like, really fast. Like, my tongue, it's like, here's the challenge. You have to stick your tongue out and see how fast up and down you can move it. Like, that's as fast as I can go. Now, show the powerful tongue. So, you've got to try that right now to see if you have that secret skill, because you might be like me. Aww.
Therefore, we know she's probably a little bit delusional as well. According to her wiki page as well, she claims that Christians are happier than atheists, which again is laughable because happiness has nothing to do with which religion you are and just comes down to personal fulfillment in life. Both Christians and atheists and everyone else of any other religion can be just as happy or miserable as anyone else. Confusingly though, apparently she also believes that the equality of races and sexes is biblical, so I guess she is a feminist, but apparently is against modern feminism, so it seems to me she just kind of hates the label of feminism and wants to be angry at it and seem angry at it because that's how she earns her money. Modern feminism, all feminism, is about gender equality. Lauren's for gender equality, she just doesn't want to admit it. Like a lot of these online anti-feminist content creators, Lauren seems like she just wants to be angry and contrary for the sake of it, you know? She's more than happy to benefit from feminism every single day of her life, but she's also more than happy to crap all over it the minute it starts making her money. I decided to cover this topic all the way back at the start of December after watching Kit's wonderful video in response to Lauren Chen. Kit goes by Feminist Spins of Cat Lady here on YouTube. She's a wonderful person, creates great content, and is a thoroughly underrated channel. I've given her a shout out before, and I'm gonna do it again. Basically, after watching Kit's video, this led me down a rabbit hole of watching a bunch of Lauren's anti-feminist content, both on her own channel and some on Praga or PragerU, however you want to pronounce it, and decided to make this video, and this was my introduction to the world of Lauren. Today we're going to be watching a couple of her videos in the anti-feminist sphere, responding to them, correcting the misinformation in them, and trust me, there is a hell of a lot of it, and we'll just go from there. As I have found recently with a lot of topics I've covered, I found myself very conflicted when making this video because on the one hand, I can't get over how much Lauren just gets wrong in her videos and how much there is to correct, and it's so frustrating to hear someone be so ignorant so consistently. But at the same time, I also do feel really sorry for her as a person. Without naming any names, I've spoken to someone who met her a couple of times in the past, and it makes me conflicted covering topics like this and talking about people like Lauren, because she is as much a victim of the harmful misogynistic crap she promotes as she is responsible for it, if that makes sense. This doesn't absolve her of any responsibility, of course, and this doesn't mean she can't be criticised for the things she keeps saying publicly, but I also feel like we do need to extend a little bit of compassion to her too, which is really hard when you hear the things she says, but I think it's important to remember at the end of the day she is human and she has privately been hurt by the community she's a part of. I obviously can't verify anything myself because I wasn't there. I've only heard stories, and I'm not going to name any names or get into any specifics. But by the sounds of things, she has been treated like crap in the past by certain pushy, misogynistic, and ultimately just nasty right-wing male commentators, for lack of a better word, as have most women who work in that sphere. And for that, I do feel really bad for her. I said in my video on Just Pearly Things that I was genuinely worried for her being around so many literally dangerous men, like Andrew Tate, for example. He's just one of many very dangerous men she has had on her podcast and in her studio and worked with. These are literally abusive men. Andrew Tate, for example, has literally bragged about trafficking women. There are videos of him hitting and abusing women. There are countless women who say he has raped them. He is a dangerous, abusive man, and he's not the only one she's worked with. Plus, it's no secret that a lot of those men in the right-wing commentary sphere are seriously abusing cocaine. Like, most right-wing commentary channels on YouTube that you can think of have massive cocaine problems. I don't know if that's public knowledge or not, but I guess kind of behind the scenes, everyone knows it. It's an open secret. So when you put violent, abusive men in situations with women that they expect to be submissive and quiet and then give them a bunch of alcohol and cocaine, that's never going to end well for anyone involved, is it? Those women are literally in danger. And that's what I was worried about with Pearl. And it's what I've heard about happening to a hell of a lot of women that Lauren knows and hangs around with and are part of her group, you know? So basically what I'm saying is this is why I'm conflicted about covering topics like this and covering content creators like Lauren, because on the one hand, we can't ignore that she herself is a victim of her own content, her own group of creators on YouTube, of the people she hangs around with, of the ideologies she spreads. But at the same time, she's still spreading those ideologies. She is part of the harm. She is enabling misogynistic abusers to keep being abusive and telling women publicly that they should just suck it up and take it. Too many S's there, that was very hard to say. But as much as I kind of pity her as a person on a personal level, I think we do kind of need to detach and just look at the content and, you know, regardless of who's the one saying it, have a look and say, well, is what they're saying correct? Is there any truth in this? And what it comes down to is the fact that no, there is not. I don't know if Lauren is stupid or just naive, but she gets so much wrong. It's so frustrating to see. And I think it's important that we correct her misinformation. And that's what we're doing today. After that incredibly long introduction, if you're still here, hi, thank you for watching. If you don't know me, my name is Rachel, and I create a whole bunch of videos on whatever topic I fancy at the time. This includes, but is not limited to, lots of really big in-depth book reviews, poetry analysis, pro-LGBTQ+ content, feminist content, debunking harmful fundy content, and a whole bunch more. I also have a very cute dog who sometimes potters around in my videos, so if nothing else, you might want to subscribe for her. She is a gorgeous little pickle. Basically though, whatever topic I cover, I want to try and put a focus on equality and inclusivity and just trying to be as educational as possible. That is my goal here. I want everyone to feel included. I want everyone to feel heard. And even though I might mess up and get things wrong sometimes, I'm always trying to learn and be better and grow. And I think that's all we can really ask of people. And I can promise you that I am going to keep continuing to learn as we go. So if that sounds interesting to you, it would be wonderful if you want to subscribe for more content. I also have an Instagram where you can go follow me and my personal life over on there. And if you want to help support my channel, then I do have a Patreon where you can get little things like exclusive stickers and photo and art prints and stuff like that. At some of the higher tiers, and yeah, it just keeps helping me make videos like this, and I'm incredibly grateful to every single person who supports me, so thank you. Now let's jump into the actual content that you're here for, and let's take a look at some of Lauren's videos and kind of tear them apart a little bit. I had a whole bunch more videos that I want to cover in this video, but honestly there is so much misinformation to correct that this ended up being far longer than I wanted it to be, and we're only looking at 3 videos. So if you like this video and you want to see another one, please let me know, because I have plenty more content in my back pocket that we can pull out. Let's take a look at this first video, which is oddly titled, Miley Cyrus, Virginity, all capital letters, is a social construct. Now I guess a little disclaimer before we start. Yeah, I quite like Miley Cyrus. She seems okay. I like her music. She's alright, isn't she? Also, without even watching this video yet, I can tell you this, that yes, I do thoroughly believe that virginity is a social construct. And I've spoken about this at length in quite a few videos now and talked about what a social construct means, why virginity is a social construct, and what this means for people in the real world. And we are going to be recapping a hell of a lot of that in today's video. So let's jump into this.
So today we're going to be talking about Miley Cyrus, because out of all the super progressive, kind of annoying Hollywood starlets, people like Amy Schumer, Michelle Wolf, Samantha Bee, Miley Cyrus is actually someone who, as far as I can remember, I have not made a video about yet. So today we're going to change that, because she's saying a lot of things. To absolutely nobody's surprise, it turns out that Miley Cyrus is quite the progressive. During 2016, she was very vocal about her support for Hillary Clinton, and when Donald Trump ended up winning the election instead, she famously released this video of herself.
I still think that in her lifetime she deserves to be the first female president. And that's what makes me so sad.
Hollywood liberal tears. I had forgotten how tasty you were.
Now, part of me feels like this might not be the best introduction to Lauren for any of us, or I don't know, maybe it is. Like, I love snarky humour as much as anyone else, but when your whole argument against something revolves around making edgy, outdated quips instead of actually presenting any real information or making any decent points, then I just find it quite sad and have very little respect for you. It seems to me that instead of actually wanting to educate her audience with her content, all Lauren ever seems to do, and this is just one example of it, you'll see over and over again throughout her video clips that I'm going to show you, instead of actually wanting to educate her audience or get people thinking for themselves or teach them something new or even just get them to look at things from a new perspective, she's simply pandering to a bunch of men who get off on watching women put each other down, and it is really sad. I'm also very aware of the irony of me saying that as a woman criticising another woman, but let's be honest, it's kind of different because I'm not doing this to put her down because she's a woman. I'm doing this because what she's saying is factually incorrect and is harming more women. So if criticising one woman helps millions of others, I think that's okay, as opposed to what Lauren's doing, who is just crapping all over women for the sake of it to make men happy. You know?
Oh yeah, in case anyone is interested, she is apparently one of those people who doesn't want to have kids because of climate change. I have made entire videos pushing back on this belief in the past, but in this case I have to say I am completely not bothered by the idea of Miley Cyrus not becoming a mother.
You know, actually, I have to say this is one thing I did learn from Lauren. One thing out of however many hours of video I watched. But it is one thing. I didn't actually know this about Miley Cyrus, and I do think it's really, really cool. I know a lot of people don't agree with me necessarily when I talk about the environmental impact that humans have on the planet, but the more I read about what we're doing to the planet and how many resources we are using and overusing and the damage we are doing, the pollution we are causing, the more I can't help but support people who don't want kids for the sake of the environment. I personally am child-free by choice for a number of reasons. Environmental reasons aren't my number one reason, but yeah, they're definitely up there on the list, so I get that. I do think one thing that's worth discussing here though is a very concerning point that Lauren makes. She has made it very clear, not just in this video, but in a number of other videos. There was one I was going to cover all about her basically crapping all over child-free people, which we're not covering in this video, but I might at a later date. And there's some other stuff about child-free people later that she is just, oh god, it's ridiculous. Anyway, point is, Lauren repeatedly makes it very clear that she doesn't agree with people choosing to be child-free in general at all. She thinks it's wrong unless she disagrees with their political beliefs, in which case she says she's fine with it. Not because she respects them as individuals and them having bodily autonomy and control of their lives and the freedom to make choices for themselves. She doesn't respect their beliefs. She just simply doesn't want people with opposing beliefs to her to have any offspring because she doesn't want them to have what she perceives as any influence on the future generations. It's petty as hell. Now, of course, there's many problems with this. Of course there are. The most obvious one being that someone like Miley Cyrus is probably one of the most influential women in the world. She is going to have an influence on her peers and future generations, whether you want her to or not, whether she has kids or not. And that is actually true for so many of us. I am on a you know, if this is Miley Cyrus, my influence is this, but it's still more influence than a person has by just having 1 or 2 or 3 kids, you know? I feel like I can do so much more for the world and hopefully influence more people to do good and be good and love themselves and feel empowered in themselves by doing this, having a job, being myself, putting content out into the world. I feel I can do more good and influence more people this way than I ever could by having a kid or kids of my own. And in fact, this is something which I can't remember if it was another video or a later video, but I'll pop the clip in here. Lauren even admits for herself, she just never seems to make the connection back to this point. Do you know what I mean?
Miley Cyrus has a huge and young audience. Over 90 million people follow her on Instagram, and that's just one single social media platform. 90 million followers. That's a huge number, and don't forget that number represents real people out there. Miley Cyrus may not be a politician or some great scholar, but as luck would have it, when it comes to influencing today's youth, she has a lot more sway than any politician or scholar out there.
And secondly, I really hate the idea of people having kids purely because they want to pass on their beliefs to someone, which is something that we see across so many of the fundies I've covered on my channel in the past, especially people like Classically Abby, Girl Defined, and so on. They seem to think that once you have a kid, you indoctrinate it with your beliefs, and then they grow up to be a little clone of you, and you're putting like your little army out into the world, and I absolutely hate it. It makes me so sad. Surely the point of having kids, or of having any influence on other people, young people in general, is not to tell them what to think and who to be and to be exactly like you, but surely you need to teach young people how to think for themselves, give them the tools to examine the world around them and make informed decisions for themselves. When you teach kids to just parrot what you think as a parent, they grow up to be, for lack of a better word, idiots. You end up with people like Bethany Beal who just spout a bunch of hateful stuff, but don't really understand why they're saying it or what it really means for the people around them or even their own lives. On the other hand, if you give kids the tools they need to figure things out for themselves and come to their own conclusions, then chances are, even if you're wrong, they'll go on to make the right choices. Or, if they end up making the wrong choices, you can each still discuss it together and, you know, learn from each other, figure things out. I feel like, for example, even with my niece and nephew, if they grow up to have very different political beliefs to me or their parents or the rest of our family or anything like that, I don't mind so much as long as they're making up their own mind and they have good reasons to support what they're thinking and doing, and they're actually making choices that they believe are the best for people and not just what they've been told by someone else. You know, I would never want them to just parrot back things they've heard. I want them to have the skills to think for themselves. Anyway, back to the video. Lauren then claims that Miley gets more attention for stunts than actual work.
Maybe it's because I've never been a huge fan of her music, Party in the USA aside, but to me, since leaving Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus has always kind of seemed like the celebrity who gets way more attention for the crazy stuff that they do rather than the actual work that they do. Kind of like the polar opposite of people like Meryl Streep and Adele, if you will.
Which really doesn't make much sense to me because, one, Miley is an incredibly talented singer. Like, even if you don't enjoy the style of music that she makes, you cannot deny that she is an incredibly talented woman who works ridiculously hard. Two, talking about working ridiculously hard, I don't know if you guys have seen that recent video she put out. It's like an interview where she's going through her schedule back from when she was like 15 or something. And that poor girl was working like 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and she's basically like never stopped since then. She works so unbelievably hard all the time, and I think you need to give her a little bit of credit for that. And three, all the stuff that Lauren calls stunts and blah blah blah, it's all part of her job. Like, it really is. The things like interviews, photo shoots, social media, all the kind of PR stuff, like, that is literally part of her job. Most musicians today have to build up some hype for their music. They have to be a brand themselves in order to sell records. It's just what the state of the music industry is today. You need to have a team behind you that markets you well as musical talent. One alone is not enough anymore. Lauren then strangely uses examples like Meryl Streep and Adele as being polar opposites opposites of Miley, which is just kind of odd to me, isn't it? I mean, I get it. Meryl is a bit older and was, you know, she started her generation at a very different time to when Miley Cyrus did. So in order to get to her level of fame, it would have definitely been a different path to what Miley had to take. But Adele, they're like basically the same age, aren't they? And I think Adele started in her teens as well, although she definitely wasn't doing as much at that age as Miley was. But, you know, I guess in some ways similar career paths. And yeah, Adele does the exact same stuff that Miley does. The photo shoots, the Instagram posts, the interviews, the magazine covers, I don't even know what they do, like all that stuff. I don't see how you can call them polar opposites when they're both doing the same job in a similar way. They just, I don't know, have slightly different styles. I think Lauren is just letting her personal biases against Miley show and ignoring the actual issue here when we talk about, you know, I guess the entertainment industry and music in general and all that kind of thing, which is essentially the commodification of being human. Both Miley and Adele are commodified as people. Their bodies, their image, their voice, their talent, their personalities are all essentially commodified and sold. And you know, even as a YouTuber, this is something that I feel I struggle with as well, because like, where do you draw that line between your personal life and professional life? How much do you tell people about your life to, you know, be relatable and explain points without giving too much of yourself away? It's a really hard line to walk. I don't think the fact that people like Miley and Adele have essentially been turned into brands is something to necessarily criticize them for as individuals, but it is something to kind of maybe criticize the industry for as a whole, but at the same time congratulate them as individuals for understanding how the industry works and finding success in that, you know? Anyway, I'm rambling a lot.
And with that being said, Cyrus's latest PR stunt, which is indeed gaining a lot of attention, including this video, was an image she posted to her Instagram account meant to promote her upcoming album.
Yeah, because again, Adele never posts anything to Instagram to promote her albums, does she? Yeah, really polar opposites.
The image that is appearing on people's screens right now is a jarring one. There are red latex hands clasping what looks like a red-toothed latex vagina with the caption, "Virginity is a social construct." As I'm sure you can imagine, people who follow Miley Cyrus on Instagram are probably used to her shenanigans by now. But even so, this particular post did stir up somewhat of a controversy.
If we want to be accurate, I would say it's more of a toothed vulva, to be fair. You know, the teeth are more like where the labia would be. There's no visible hole, which would be a vagina. I would call this a toothed vulva. But you know, I'm being picky here. It happens. We, in casual speech, often use vulva and vagina interchangeably, and I've done it before. You mix it up, it happens, it's fine. Just thought it was worth clarifying, you know. And you know what? Overall, yes, this image is jarring, but it is supposed to be, because it is a piece of art making a statement. I bet Lauren is also the type to get offended by basically any feminist piece of art. For example, like, think of Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but it is an incredible, incredible piece of artwork. I saw it a few years back at the Brooklyn Museum, and basically it's this big, massive whole room sized art installation with this big triangular table set with all these like beautiful dinner plates, glasses, embroidered tablecloths, and each setting at the table is for a different woman, either a figure from history or an important mythical figure or something like that. It is absolutely stunning. And at this dinner table, on each of the plates, except two I think, there is the most beautiful, elaborate model of a vulva. Each different, because every vulva is different. The tiles on the floor are inscribed with the names of different women through history and different influential women. Every aspect of the piece of art, from, you know, the embroidery to the designs on the tables and the glasses and all that sort of thing, each bit is meant to represent a different bit of work or art or something that women have contributed to the world, you know? Basically, it celebrates women, our achievements, our work, our impact on the world, and also our femininity and who we are. And just because within that it chooses to include and celebrate vulvas, that doesn't make it crass or mean there's anything wrong with it. Yes, it's a jarring piece of art, but it's also beautiful and it says so much. But I still reckon Lauren might get annoyed at it. I see this post from Miley on Instagram as not quite high-end art like that, but it's still to some extent, a piece of art that makes a statement, a similar statement, a less subtle statement, but a statement nonetheless about women and our achievements and our rights and our sexuality and our bodily autonomy, and how society plays a big part in defining all of those things. Virginity is a social construct. That is just a fact, and it's something that I will explain a little bit more in a moment. But sadly, it's something that not many people seem to be aware of or willing to acknowledge. And I think that comes down to most people being like Lauren and not understanding what a social construct actually is. I think it's really important to start having these conversations and just be very, very open about the way we talk about these things and be aware of these things, because women's sexuality in particular throughout history has been so heavily policed and restricted for years as a way to control women. And in many ways it still is today, especially in many, many other countries around the world. We are still oppressed to some extent in places like the UK and US, but nowhere near as much as what billions of other women face in other countries. Jessica Valenti opens her book The Purity Myth with the statement, "The lie of virginity, the idea that such a thing even exists, is ensuring that young women's perceptions of themselves is inextricable from their bodies, and that their ability to be moral actors is absolutely dependent on their sexuality. It's time to teach our daughters that their ability to be good people depends on their being good people, not on whether or not they're sexually active." Once we start to acknowledge that virginity is a social construct and not some objective thing, it allows us to stop letting it define our identity or our value. It allows us to have a healthy relationship with our bodies, our sexualities, and our relationships with other people, and it allows us to define these things on our own terms and not on other people's. And like I said, it's really important to remember that this is an issue that affects women all over the world. To varying degrees, of course, some more than others. I actually spoke about this in quite a bit of depth in my video that's got a title like I'm Not a Feminist or something like that, which is literally about the importance of being an intersectional feminist. To kind of cover what I said briefly and show you some clips from that video, because I think the point's relevant here. Basically, these harmful myths that virginity is something objective, which should be controlled and can be tested in some way, is something which physically harms women. And also just basically anyone with a vulva, so it harms trans men as well. We cannot forget that. It harms non-binary people with vulvas as well. And actually one of the really big things about our kind of need to control virginity and place these very strict definitions on it, mostly it seems to be men placing the definitions on women for some reason. But one of the big problems with this that is often really overlooked is that it really feeds into the still ongoing problem with female genital mutilation all over the world. Take a look at some of these clips from my previous video on this topic, and I'm going to warn you now, difficult topic to listen to, but please do if you can, because it is so important. So many of the countries and cultures that have a tradition of child marriage also have a tradition of female genital mutilation, which may be one of the most barbaric practices I came across while researching this entire series of videos. And this is not something we can just sit back and silently ignore. Every year across the world, at least 3 million girls, usually between the ages of 4 and 16, have their genitals mutilated. There are currently estimated to be between 130 and 200 million women living with the consequence of this horrific procedure. These are not small numbers. This is not something that happens to a select few. This is a widespread issue. And despite being illegal in many places, there's not a country in the world where this does not still happen. This is a cultural tradition that's existed for thousands of years and is practiced by people of so many religions, including Christianity and Islam. It's not just a one culture thing, a one religion thing, a one country thing. This is widespread. This is huge. First up though, what is female genital mutilation? I would say the description given by the World Health Organization is probably the most comprehensive description of what it is, and there are 4 different types. Now, this is going to be difficult to listen to, but what I will say is, if this is something that has happened to you, I completely understand if you want to sit out this part of the video and not watch, because it's understandable, don't worry. But if this is something you haven't experienced, I want, if you can, for you to sit and listen to this, because remember, 130 to 200 million women have had to go through this. As difficult as this is for us to listen to, it has been so much worse for them to experience. and I think it's important to understand how barbaric this procedure is. Female genital mutilation is described as procedures that intentionally alter or cause injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. There are 4 types, which I'm going to briefly summarise, but you can find out more from the World Health Organization's website. Again, links below. Type 1 is a clitoridectomy, which is the partial or total removal of the clitoris. Type 2 is excision, a partial or total removal of the clitoris and the labia minora with or without excision of the labia majora. Type 3 is infibulation, which is narrowing of the vaginal opening through the creation of a covering seal. The seal is formed by cutting and repositioning the inner or outer labia with or without removal of the clitoris. And type 4 is basically other. All of the harmful procedures to the female genitals for non-medical purposes, for example, pricking, piercing, incising, scraping, and cauterizing the genital area. I think potentially the worst part of this is that this isn't something carried out by professionals in sanitary conditions. Mostly this is done by untrained women who just happen to be nearby and available with no sterilization and no anesthetic. Even people who are cutters for a living don't generally have sanitary conditions. It's not done safely or cleanly or painlessly. It's barbaric. When recounting her own experience, Oates tells the story of being 6 years old when her mother took her to her auntie's to be cut. Her mother told her, "I was cut, your grandmother was cut, and every mother before her, and your children will be cut too. We're a family whose girls are known for our virginity. We are clean, and that means we can marry well, and you will stay pure until you get married to your husband." She was then taken into a room with the woman who would be performing the procedure, and Oates says, "She lifted up that dirty razor, the one that still had the dried blood residue of others, blood clinging to it like filthy reminders of her previous work, and she cut straight through my flesh. The pain shot through me like a bullet. I felt as if someone had taken me and dropped me into bright orange molten lava. From head to toe, the pain burned, searing the backs of my eyes and exploding in my brain." She was 6 years old. 6. This is done on girls as young as 4. And this story is not an outlier or an exception. It is the norm amongst these communities. If you want to find out more about that, I would really recommend going and watching that video in full. Or I have a couple of books linked in the source document thing for this video that you can go and check out for yourself. But I hope those clips give you a little taste of what I'm talking about here and just what is done in the name of preserving virginity and purity. If we stopped seeing virginity as something that needs to be preserved or as the only thing that gives women worth, then it would be a big start in helping combat the problem that is female genital mutilation. This isn't the only example though. The concept of virginity testing wasn't actually condemned by the World Health Organization until as recently as 2018. And then it was only after researchers from the University of Minnesota published a study about it. Kate Lister writes about this in her book, fantastic, really recommend it. It's called A Curious History of Sex. She writes, in 2017, researchers from the University of Minnesota, University of Minnesota, what is wrong with me today? It's late and I've got tired brain, that's what. Let's try this again, shall we? In 2017, researchers at the University of Minnesota published a systematic review of all available peer-reviewed research into the reliability of so-called virginity tests, where the hymen is examined as well as the impact on the person being examined. The team identified 1,269 studies. The evidence was summarized and assessed, and this was the conclusion. So this is basically Kate Lister quoting the study now. This review found that virginity examination, also known as two-finger hymen or per-vaginal examination, is not a useful clinical tool and can be physically, psychologically, and socially devastating to the examinee. From a human rights perspective, virginity testing is a form of gender discrimination as well as a violation of fundamental rights, and when carried out without consent, a form of sexual assault. Lister goes on to write, the following year in 2018, the World Health Organization, the United Nations Human Rights, and the United Nations Women issued a statement calling for the elimination of virginity testing, stating that virginity testing is a violation of the human rights of girls and women and can be detrimental to women and girls' physical, psychological, and social well-being. Again, this isn't the only issue though. Both Lister and Valenti write in their books about the popularity of purity balls, especially in countries like America, that celebrate virginity and innately tie a young girl's feelings of worth to her virginity. And of course, all the problems that come with that. And so with all this in mind, this brings me back to the point again, what is a social construct? What do we mean when we say virginity is a social construct? And what impact does our idea of virginity and our relationship with virginity have on people and society as a whole? And again, I'd like to cut back to myself talking in a couple of videos from this last year, if that's okay. I've got two clips for you here, one in which I talk about what it means for something to be a social construct. The particular clip I'm using here uses the example of aging to discuss the topic, but the same thing can be applied to any number of other social constructs, not just our relationship with aging, but other things like gender, virginity, our definition of childhood, and basically any other number of social constructs. And then the second clip I have for you is me specifically talking about why we define virginity as being a social construct. And please exclude the sound quality in that. It's my big, long, 6-hour Bethany Beals single course review thing. It's a long video to film. I had mic issues. Sorry about that. It's only for a couple of minutes, so hopefully it'll be better afterwards. But let's be very clear on one thing before we go any further, right? While the concept of aging is a biological reality, we can't deny that, our relationship with aging is a social construct. This means that the way we view aging, how much we value it or don't, what our opinions are, how we treat people differently as they age, all of that will change depending on time, place, and culture. That means it is a social construct. Now, I think what a lot of people misunderstand about the term social construct is just because it's a social construct, that doesn't mean it's fake or not real or that it doesn't exist or it makes something made up. What it means is that our definition of it changes with time, place, and culture. Our definition of it, our understanding of it, our value of it is something which is changing over time. It has changed over time, it will continue to change over time. So because we can say that our view of aging is a social construct, this means that it's really important to remember that just because one person might pick out a certain time period or place or culture and say, in these conditions, this is the view of aging, that doesn't make that the only correct way to view aging. There's no objective definition of loss of virginity from a biological or physiological perspective. There's no obvious physical change for males after they've had sex for the first time, and there's no universal physical change for all females after they've had sex for the first time. The idea that hymens break after you've had sex is an outdated one. All hymens are different shapes, different sizes, different placements, different levels of stretchiness. Some do break or tear or change via activities like sex or activities other than sex. Some hymens will never break or tear no matter how many times you have sex or do any other activities. If you are interested in finding out a little bit more about this, then I recommend Flo Perry's book, How to Have Feminist Sex, which is great. It's cute, it's short, it's fun, it's accessible, it's got some beautiful artwork in it, and it's a really, really great little resource. Otherwise, there's a great section in Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are, where she writes, you may or may not have a hymen, which is a thin membrane along the lower edge of your vaginal opening. She goes on to say the hymen doesn't break or stay broken forever, like some kind of freshness seal. If a hymen tears or bruises, it heals, and the size of a hymen doesn't vary depending on whether a vagina has been penetrated. Also, it doesn't usually bleed. Any blood with first penetration is more likely due to general vaginal tearing from lack of lubrication than damage to the hymen. She goes on to say, what does change when a woman begins having the hymen stretch regularly is that it grows more flexible. And as a woman's hormones change as she approaches the end of adolescence around 25 years old, the hymen is likely to atrophy and become much less noticeable, if it was noticeable at all. There's a massive variation in how hymens can look and act and feel and where they're placed. There's not just one way to have a hymen. This is what I mean, it's not a universal thing. So to look back at this in the context of virginity, if it's not defined by something physical and biological, then we can say the only way it's actually defined is by society, and those definitions can change with time and place and culture. Therefore, it's a social construct. Traditional ideas of virginity are so narrow that most people only ever think about intercourse where a penis penetrates a vagina as being real sex where you can lose your virginity. But these traditional definitions of virginity don't take into account other ways to have sex. They don't take into account same-sex couples. They don't take into account how it differs for different people with different preferences. Is loss of virginity really about just having or putting a penis in a vagina? Or is there more to it than that? Can a gay man or woman never really have sex if they never have a penis put in their vagina or never put their penis in a vagina? Even if they're regularly having sex with other women or anal sex with other men. In terms of both genders, where does anal sex fall into this discussion? If you're a woman who has had anal sex but not vaginal, are you a virgin or not? What about oral sex? What about touching each other with hands? If so, where on the body? Do orgasms come into the definition of all? And ultimately, we have to ask, why does it matter? Why do we need to talk about virginity at all? Why do we put value on virginity? And maybe we should stop. As Ricky Bergen writes, virginity has been used as a marker of purity and morality, but neither of these virtues were necessarily strictly about the girl in question. They go on to discuss how a sexually active girl was seen as a disappointment to her family and as a sign that her father couldn't control her. And let's be honest, the idea that a person lacks morality if they've had penetrative sex is so bizarre and unfounded, right? And so bearing all that in mind, going back to Miley's post, this is why I think it's so good for someone like her with such a huge platform and influence on people, especially women and people with vulvas, to keep drawing our attention to the fact about virginity being a social construct. It's okay for someone like me to say it, and the, 10, 20, 30,000 of you watching this will be like, oh yeah, okay, I get it, cool. But when someone like Miley Cyrus says it, who has millions of people listening to her, yeah, some are going to be mad, but hopefully she's actually going to get through to a lot of them as well. A lot more than someone like me ever could. And sadly, or I guess helpfully, a lot more than academics who study this ever can. Sometimes we need, people like the academics with the qualifications to do the work, and then someone with a lot of influence to kind of signal boost that and get it out there to the masses and put it in a way that is simple and straightforward and that people are going to hear and listen to. And as for the image specifically, yes, it's provocative, but that is the point of art, I think an image of a red vulva with teeth is a statement about taking back control of our bodies and our sexualities and stopping feeling ashamed of our vulvas and vaginas or whatever genitals you have down there. It's about making what has previously been a body part that we were made to feel we should hide away and not talk about and be ashamed of, making that a strong, empowering body part which we are in control of. Something we should be proud of and unafraid of. Anyway, they're my thoughts. Rambling for a while, I know. Let's see what Lauren has to say, or rather which articles written by other people she's going to parrot and pretend are her own original thoughts.
As Cosmopolitan wrote about the fan reaction to Miley's post, quote, some claimed that she was being a bad role model. One wrote, Miley, you are too smart for putting out something as dumb. You have a responsibility toward the youth of today, for God's sake.
Yeah, you know what, as I mentioned briefly before, you're right, yeah. She does have a lot of influence, and a lot of that is on an audience of, older teenagers, people in their early 20s, that sort of thing. And I do think it's a really good, positive, empowering message to be sending to young people. And I'm not going to apologize for feeling that way. I often wish someone had just said this stuff to me outright when I was in my teens and early 20s, This is what I needed to hear a lot sooner than I did. Throughout the teen years, and especially the later teen years and stuff like that, there is so much going on for people at that time. Your hormones are going crazy. There's all these conflicting messages being thrown at you from everyone and everywhere around you. They're feeling pressure from their peers, from their parents, from their teachers, from everyone around them, and it's really hard to know what is the right thing to do. So yeah, I fully believe that explaining to teens, especially when it comes to things like sexuality, that something like your sexuality, your gender, your virginity is a social construct, and explaining to them exactly what that means. And I think explaining to them specifically, especially to people with vulvas, that their bodies are nothing to be ashamed of, and instead something to feel empowered by and embrace and love about yourself, I think that's a really great thing. I fully believe in providing kids and teens with all the information and tools they need at an appropriate age, to go out and make the best decisions for themselves, so that when they do grow up and they do become adults, they aren't suddenly thrust out into the world with no idea of what they're doing or why they're doing anything. I mean, yeah, ideally we don't want underage kids having sex. I think we can all agree on that, right? But that's why you need to educate them early on, so they have the tools to assess for themselves when they're ready to, you know, do I want to have sex? What does sex really mean? How do we do this safely? How do I pick the right partner? You need to give them the tools to do that before they're thrust into a situation where they have to make those decisions. By giving teens these tools to make these decisions for themselves, you're not encouraging them to have sex underage or too early or too young or anything like that. You're simply giving them the tools they need to know when is the right time for them. And then when they get to that stage and like, you know what, I am ready for this, this is what I want to do, they're prepared and they're safe and they're happy and they're fulfilled. I really think that with posts like this, Miley is providing an empowering message for everyone, and this is not something that is inappropriate to be showing or telling to older teens. And obviously adults as well. Yeah, of course, maybe it's not something you want children seeing, but then again, why are your children on Instagram? They shouldn't be. That's up to the parents to control, not Miley for posting, you know? I think if you're old enough to be on Instagram, you are old enough to see this message and start thinking for yourself what it means and how that is going to impact you as you grow up and get older.
One woman even argued that Miley was basically shaming people for being virgins. She wrote, "Honestly, you shouldn't be posting stuff like that. You should respect people's choices and respect the fact that you have a young audience too. It's not okay to shame people that choose to stay a virgin or anything like that."
I'm so confused by this because there is nothing in this post which is shaming anyone for being a virgin. In fact, I would say it is literally the opposite. It's allowing people to define for themselves what their sexual experiences, or lack of, look like and are, and that's a good thing.
Many others added that virginity is actually a thing, but that people should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies and not be judged.
Yeah, Miley's also saying that virginity is a thing, but that thing is a social construct. Again, I think this is down to people, including people like Lauren, completely misunderstanding what the term social construct means. This is why we need decent education. Remember when I said earlier that just because something is a social construct doesn't suddenly make it not real or fake, it just makes it a social construct. It still exists, it just means its definition changes depending on time, place, and culture. And that definition has the potential to evolve or keep evolving. And if you want, you can change how you view that definition, or how, or what that definition means to you if you want. I really thought that with the type of channel she has, she would know basic things like the definition of social construct. I mean, she uses it enough in this video, and you'll see her using it again going forward. So I don't get how she is misunderstanding this so badly. And again, in regards to Miley's post here, yeah, she's also arguing through this post that people should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies and not be judged. How are people misinterpreting this so badly?
So, is virginity a social construct? Well, no, not really. I mean, virginity is a thing. Someone who is a virgin is different than someone who is not a virgin because one of them has had sex and the other hasn't. So in terms of differentiating the idea of having had sex and having not had sex, no, virginity is not a social construct.
At this point in the script, I was getting very, very annoyed. My script literally says, "I'm trying so hard not to make personal comments here, but I have a really hard time believing someone with a following of over 500,000 people can be this ill-informed." See, Lauren doesn't know what this term means. She keeps using words that she doesn't understand. It's so frustrating. No one is saying that virgins aren't a thing. No one is saying that virginity isn't a thing. We're saying that the definition of it is not an objective fact. It's something which is defined by a particular society at a particular time. That's why different people call themselves virgins despite having different levels of sexual experience. We saw in Pam Stenzel's terrible, terrible sex education course that she thought any type of sexual touching at all was a loss of virginity. Whereas some people don't count a loss of virginity until you have, for example, a penis penetrating a vagina, or a penis penetrating an anus, or so on. We know there are different definitions for virginity depending on where and when and who you are. Therefore, it's a social construct. It's not that hard. There is no objective definition of virginity. There is no test for virginity, as we've already discussed. You can't tell if someone is a virgin by looking at them or examining them or performing a test on them. The only person who can tell you if they're a virgin or not is that individual, and they will define that based on their own definition, the definition that they decide to use based on what they believe, and pardon you, Kyra, what society around them believes. Did you enjoy your biscuit, baby bear? I'm so sorry about that. I could retake this, but it was kind of cute as well, so. Also, I was on a roll and I don't exactly quite know what I was saying. I have used this example before, right? And I used it recently while I was talking to Elise while making this video. And think of something like gravity, right? Gravity and its definition are objective facts. How we define gravity doesn't change depending on where you are in the world or what time you're living in and stuff like that. Yeah, okay, at some points in time people didn't know what gravity was, but gravity was still there, existing in the same way it does today. You can go back in time 100 years, you can go forward in time 100 years, you can go forward in time 1,000 years, and I mean, unless something happens to really drastically change, for example, the mass of the planet, gravity is still going to be the same, and regardless, it's still going to work in exactly the same way. It is an objective fact. We can't just wake up and think, oh, you know what, I fancy changing gravity today. Take other things as well. How we define an ion is an objective fact. No matter where we go in the world, what an ion is doesn't change. On the other hand, look at something like money, for example. That changes, and how we define it changes, how we value it changes, how it works changes, depending on what time we are in, where we are in the world, and what society we're in. People will use different things for currency. People will have different ways of measuring money. Money means different things to different people. If we go back in time 100 years, money will be very different to how it is today. If I go off to France, money is different than how it is here in the UK. Money is a social construct. Now, that doesn't make money fake. That doesn't make money worthless. That doesn't mean money stops existing. That doesn't mean we should destroy all money. It just means we need to be aware that money is something which is defined differently by different societies. And the definition of it and the value we place upon it has changed and will continue to change. And we can apply these exact same principles to things like gender, sexuality, virginity, our relationship with childhood, and so many other things. Oh, here you go, of course, look, I just googled a list of social constructs. Of course, there's so many things I haven't even begun to mention. Beauty standards, language, race, social class, and clashes, I guess, social norms, religion, units of time, marriage, our relationship with education, all social constructs. That doesn't mean none of those things exist or are worthless or meaningless. It simply means they're social constructs. That is it. That is all there is to it. Social construct is not a dirty word. I quite liked this passage that I found in an article titled "Why Virginity is a Damaging Social Construct." If you want to read the whole thing, of course it will be linked in the source document. This article says, put simply, a social construct is an idea created by society, and it's not always something concrete we can see like rivers, mountains and oceans. Instead, social constructs are how we humans make sense of the world. Social constructs are driven by the ideas and beliefs which exist in our societies. The precious myths and expectations surrounding the traditional idea of virginity are very much the product of norms and ideas created by us humans. And if you want another example, look at how virginity is only really a thing amongst humans. You don't get dogs going around going to each other going, "Oi mate, you a virgin." It's something created by humans. And that definition will continue to change depending on who is talking about it, essentially. And it's interesting again because, just as a kind of slightly more personal example, while I was making this video, I was talking to a whole bunch of friends about how we all defined our first times and how we each individually defined a loss of virginity. And now obviously we're all different ages. We all came from very different places across the world. So we all had really different definitions of it. I won't go into specifics, obviously, but it was very interesting how each person had a different idea of, like, this is the point where I first had sex. Each of our individual definitions were driven by the norms we were surrounded with at the time, the beliefs we'd formed ourselves and seen around us, and each of us had to make sense of the world around us and our experience in it in our own way. It's very clear virginity really is a social construct. The article I referenced before ends by saying, maybe it's time we took charge and actively shaped the social construct of virginity for the better, by teaching young people that sex, and therefore virginity, means different things to different people, by acknowledging that all experiences of sex are valid, and the most important thing, that if, how, and when you have sex has nothing to do with anyone else, and everything to do with what's right for you and any sexual partner or partners, of course. And that's definitely what I want to try and encourage in my content and when I talk about these topics. And that's thoroughly what I believe Miley was trying to promote with her content. I don't understand how people like Lauren and the other people commenting on this can have a problem with that. And also how they can misunderstand it so completely.
However, I will acknowledge, and I think this is maybe what Miley Cyrus was trying to get at in a very confusing and unclear way. In our culture, there are certain ideas surrounding the issue of virginity that are absolutely social constructs. And before anyone starts calling me a hippie or an SJW, let me explain. Let's start with how virginity is viewed very differently for men than it is for women. In our culture, unfortunately nowadays, it's not a very popular thing to be male and a virgin.
Wait, here, Lauren, you are acknowledging that there are different attitudes to virginity based on cultures. That makes it a social construct. You are giving us the definition of social construct and then saying, but it's not a social construct. How can one human be this dense? Also, I'm sorry, but acknowledging a fact of something being a social construct does not make someone a hippie or SJW. Lauren really is just pandering to these like right-wing misogynists, isn't she? God's sake. And finally, the only one here being very confusing and unclear is Lauren, because she doesn't want to admit that Miley and other feminists are right, and that this is actually a belief you seem to share, but either you don't realise that you do, or you're unwilling to admit you do, because that might damage your grift.
So you see, virginity as a concept may not be a social construct, but a lot of the feelings that we have toward it are.
Except again, she's forgetting that there's no one way to define loss of virginity. I'll go back to what I said earlier. What is a loss of virginity? My definition of it and Lauren's definition of it, for example, might be very different. Is it to do with the penis penetrating a vagina? What about same-sex couples? Is their definition of loss of virginity different because there's no penis penetrating vagina? Where does anal sex come into this? Oral sex? Any kind of sexual touching at all? What if someone penetrates you with an object or a toy? What if you're raped? And I know this is a very difficult and touchy topic, but do we count that as a loss of virginity? Or, as it does in my opinion, does it only count if the penetration was consensual? Clearly, these are all questions we need to ask for ourselves and decide, okay, well, what constitutes sex to us? What constitutes a loss of virginity to us? There's no one clear definition that is universal among all peoples at all times in all cultures. Therefore, it's a social construct, but Lauren doesn't want to admit that because I don't really know why, and it's very, very frustrating.
And I think this is also true, if not especially true, from a Christian perspective. Christianity emphasizes chastity outside of marriage. And because of that, a lot of Christians get really wrapped up talking about virginity and purity, because if you are supposed to be chaste right up until you get married, it should stand to reason that you will be a virgin when you get married. But the obsession with virginity and purity can be harmful, because what if there's someone out there who isn't a virgin but now wants to lead a Christian lifestyle and they're not married? Even if they're completely embracing chastity now, are they less pure because they're not a virgin?
Hey, would you look at that? Lauren acknowledging the damage that purity culture can do. And earlier she acknowledged the whole prude versus whore issue that women always face. Funny how she's raising the same issues that... Wait, what's the group that talks about this again? Feminists.
So I'd agree that worshipping or idolizing virginity is pretty weird, but at the same time, I don't think it's a good idea to dismiss the concept entirely.
Again, no one is trying to dismiss the concept entirely. No one said that. You are making this up. I don't know, I genuinely don't know if Lauren is strawmanning here because she's embarrassed that she has a feminist viewpoint and is trying to pretend, well, that's not what feminists think, so or she's just too stupid to know that she's talking nonsense.
Virginity may not define us as people, but that doesn't mean that for a lot of people, I would say most people, their first times don't carry any emotional significance. Telling a bunch of young adults that, hey, virginity is a social construct with no further follow-up, dialogue, or conversation, anything like that. I personally would be concerned that maybe someone out there ends up doing something that they aren't emotionally prepared to cope with.
Again, and I don't know how many times I have to say this, she's wrong. Acknowledging that virginity is a social construct is not, by any means, telling people that your first sexual experience or any sexual experience doesn't matter, isn't important, is meaningless, or any of that stuff. Understanding that virginity is a social construct is just saying there's no one way to define virginity, therefore we shouldn't be judging others or allowing others to judge us for our sexual experiences or lack of. And that it's okay for us to set our own boundaries and define ourselves in our own way. Again, if anything, by teaching people that, it's helping people acquire the tools they need to make sure their own personal sexual experiences are safe and fun. And, as I said in this past video, here's a clip for you. And ultimately, we have to ask, why does it matter? Why do we need to talk about virginity at all? Why do we put value on virginity? And maybe we should stop. Instead of considering things in terms of, am I a virgin or am I not a virgin, we should be looking at more important questions and considering them for ourselves and our own lives. For example, am I ready to be emotionally and physically intimate with someone? What does that really mean? What are my boundaries? What would I like to try? What would I like to wait to try? What would I never like to do? Is this the right person to do this with? Do I have a time frame in mind for when I'd like this to happen? Can I effectively and safely communicate my needs to this person? Can they effectively and safely communicate their needs to me? Have we discussed consent and boundaries? Are we being safe? Are we using condoms? Are we using other contraception? Have we had STI tests before being intimate? Have we discussed these things at all? And after a sexual experience, you might want to ask yourself, well, how do I feel now? Am I sexually satisfied? Do I still feel safe? Do I still feel comfortable? What did I like? What didn't I like? Is there anything I wish went differently? And so on. And the important thing about these questions is that these aren't ones you just ask the first time you ever have sex. These are the kinds of questions you can keep coming back to with every single sexual experience and every single sexual partner. If you look at sex this way, of always asking, is this the right person? Am I feeling safe doing this? Am I comfortable doing this? Have we discussed these important boundaries and safety issues and so on? Then that's going to be far more, I guess, useful to you and your partner than just, am I a virgin or not? You know? And finally, to go back to the video title on the topic of the wedding night, I think they mean the first time having sex, which again, I think is something worth talking about and preparing people for. But I extend that to include all forms of physical intimacy. So not just the first time you have sex, but the first time you're emotionally or physically intimate with someone. Let's talk about how do you get ready for that? How do you know you're ready? How do you prepare for that? And so on. And again, I think it's worth noting that this should be something you do when you're ready to do it, not when society says you should be ready.
But considering the source of this post, I can't help but wonder whether the phrase virginity is a social construct is meant to devalue not necessarily virginity, but sex itself to the point where it's completely meaningless.
Again, there's quite literally nothing in this post which suggests this, like quite the opposite in fact. I can't help but think that Lauren is just projecting her own personal biases against Miley Cyrus here, and seeing things which aren't there because she can't seem to understand that a sexually confident woman who expresses her sexuality differently to her is still portraying sex as a meaningful experience. Just because you have different experiences to someone else, that doesn't make one of you have more or less meaningful experiences than the other. They can both be meaningful to you, maybe in different ways, maybe in the same way. I really cannot, and I know I keep saying this, I keep coming back to it, I can't wrap my head around it. I don't get it. I can't decide whether Lauren is trying to be a contrarian here because she's a conservative grifter and knows it'll make her money, or if she's really this ill-informed on such a huge range of topics. I don't know. And with that in mind, actually, I would like to play you this clip of Lauren projecting massively.
You know, going through all of the crazy things Miley Cyrus has said and done over the years, I am starting to wonder how much of it is her actual personality versus just a show she's putting on for media attention.
The last bit of this video really, really annoys me on a personal level. Just watch this.
I mean, she said some kooky stuff regarding her marriage to Liam Hemsworth, who is very much just a cisgendered white male, she said, "We're redefining, to be frank, what it looks like for someone that's a queer person like myself to be in a hetero relationship. A big part of my pride and my identity is being a queer person." And during the same interview, she also stated, "What I'm in love with exists on almost a spiritual level. It has nothing to do with sexuality. Relationships and partnerships in a new generation, I don't think they have so much to do with sexuality or gender. Sex is actually a small part, and gender is a very small part, almost irrelevant part of a relationship. Look, you're a girl who's married to a guy. That's fine. It's a straight marriage. That's okay. You don't need to conjure up all this extra weirdness and talk of gender and sexuality to try to convince people that you're still cool and special. It's fine. Just be happy with your husband."
Now, obviously this video is quite old. It was made 4 years ago and Miley isn't still married to Liam, but I'm so sick in general of the erasure of bisexuality and pansexuality just because someone is in a relationship with a person of the opposite gender. Miley is still pansexual regardless of who her current or past partners are. Bisexual people and pansexual people are still bisexual and pansexual regardless of who their current or past partners are. It is that simple. And I do think it's important that people like Miley speak out about it and keep reminding people, because people like Lauren keep erasing it. There is nothing wrong with anything Miley says here. She's not trying to be special, she's simply explaining what relationships mean to her as an individual and how she defines her own sexuality. And I think that's a really important thing to do and keep speaking up about publicly, to completely normalize it and stop with this bisexual and pansexual erasure. I really hate this, "Oh, just step up and reminding people your pan thing," because sorry but no, why should she? People keep erasing it, so she has to keep reminding them. If people just finally accepted it and understood it and didn't keep erasing her experiences like Lauren do, she might not have to keep reminding people. But sadly, we don't live in that society yet, so people like Miley have to keep doing it. Regardless of the gender of her current partner, she is still a queer woman, and that is not something she should ever have to shut up about and be quiet about. And I love the fact that she is normalizing it and she is proud of it, because not all of us feel comfortable or safe enough to do that, and I think she is an absolute inspiration for it. Okay, rant over. Let's move on to the next video. This is the video that Lauren made for the hellish PragerU, or PragerU, and I'm English, I say things differently. This is called, it's a short video, it's 5 minutes long, and it is the longest 5 minutes you'll ever experience in your life. It is called Dating, Don't Waste Your Time, and she starts in the most patronizing way.
Women, here's a revolutionary idea. Date with a purpose.
Oh, wow, yes. Revolutionary, because no one's ever done that before. Like, seriously, this is like when Bethany spoke about intentional dating on her singles course, like it was something that only Christian women had a monopoly on, and she was like reinventing the wheel. No one else was doing this. She expected people to pay for this advice, like no one else was doing it. I will say now what I said then. I think it's really important when you're dating to know for yourself and communicate your intentions before you go into dating anyone. There's no right or wrong type of intentions to have. You just need to make sure you're clear on it and you communicate what it is with your partner. If you just want casual, that's fine, but know it and communicate it. If you want something more serious, know it and communicate it. And obviously anywhere in between as well. You just need to make sure you're both on the same page so no one gets hurt. And if you are looking for something serious and long-term with someone, then again, know your core values, know your core needs, and know your long-term goals so you can communicate them to your potential partner and see if they align as well. It's really important to never just settle for the first person who shows you interest if you don't have those core values aligning, because as I always say, and I feel like we should turn this into a drinking game now where I down a bottle of wine every time I say it, it is better to be happy alone than with the wrong person. But yeah, just as she was making a good point, Lauren goes and ruins it.
Women, here's a revolutionary idea. Date with a purpose. What purpose? Getting married.
Yeah, no thank you. Why can Lauren and people like her not understand that some people just don't want to get married? And that's okay. I personally am one of them. I am very, very happy in my long-term relationship, and neither me or my partner want a traditional marriage. And there is nothing wrong with that. What it meant is that while I was still dating and meeting people, and when I met Kieran, it was really important for me to be upfront about what I wanted, my core values and my needs and my goals, so I could find someone on the same page as me. The really important things for me in terms of long-term goals were that I wanted someone who wanted long long-term commitment, but didn't want a traditional marriage, didn't necessarily want to do the whole living together and being together constantly thing, who still valued their independence, their space as much as I did, and also didn't want kids. And thankfully, I found that. The thing is, some people do want to get married though, and some people do want the whole living together and kids thing, and or just one or two of those things, and that is all absolutely fine. You just need to know it and communicate it. There's nothing wrong with intentional dating, but there's everything right with intentional dating. There's just no one right way to have intentions.
Whoa, am I moving too fast for you? Making you uncomfortable? Dating, you say, is just, well, dating. You know, hookups, casual flings, having fun. Yeah? Who said so?
No one. No one said that. Lauren is strawmanning again. Some people want that, and that is absolutely fine. Some people don't, and that is absolutely fine. Some people want different things at different points in their life, and that is absolutely fine. The important thing is knowing what you want and communicating that, not only doing things one way, which happens to be Lauren's way.
But I am saying that you need to ask yourself this question. Why do you want to go on a date with someone?
Yeah, I actually agree. This is a really, really good question. But there's no one right answer. As long as you're both on the same page, that's all that really matters. If you want to go on a date just for some casual fun, and so does the other person, there's nothing wrong with that. Casual dating can be a really, really healthy, beneficial thing to your life. It can be a great way to get to know yourself better, to get to know other people better, to meet people from different backgrounds to you, to grow in confidence, to have some fun, to experience things you've never experienced before, to grow as a person, to meet people who'll push you to be better. If that's what you want, that's absolutely okay. Of course, you can get that from long-term relationships too, but some people might want to get that through some casual relationships first, and that's fine. Sometimes people have the same kind of outcomes they want to achieve, but they have to go down different paths to get it.
Physical attraction? That's important. Common interest in something? Also important. But what else? Let's face it, most of the time we, and by we here I'm referring to women, have no idea.
Oh, for God's sake, are you serious? Like, can we just stop infantilizing women like this, please? Really? She is acting like women have no brains, no control over their lives, no autonomy. No, well, that's what she wants from women, clearly. But it is ridiculous. Sure, some women might be like this, some people might be like this, plenty of men are like it too. But I really don't think it's a most women thing. It's not a gendered thing. It's just an individual thing. Some people don't know, some people do. But let's not infantilize all women, yeah? This is just another generalization that Lauren is making to put women down and patronize them with, once again, no evidence to back it up.
We too often assume that relationships have levels of commitment, progressing, if they progress at all, like video games. A hookup is level 1, dating is level 2, level 3 living together, and then, after we've had those, maybe we're ready for marriage. But in fact, relationships usually don't progress that way. Hookups arise out of whim, impulse, or simple attraction. Dating is often based on compatibility or convenience, and sometimes on the hope that something serious might develop. Living together may be based on real love and a tryout for marriage, but it can also be based on less serious considerations like lack of other opportunities, desire for a roommate, or the inability to afford a single apartment. But marriage is a different enterprise entirely. Those looking for a good marriage are looking for someone who wants to build a shared life. They're looking for someone who shares their values and beliefs, moral, political, and, where applicable, religious.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to this. It's stupid, right? Like, it absolutely is. I mean, yeah, all relationships are different, and some may fit into these stereotypes she's got going on in this video here. But also a lot of relationships don't. And not all dating is just based on convenience. I really, really hate this demonization of living together because it's not a real commitment. It's just done to save money. And that, like, marriage is the only real commitment, the only real quality relationship. It's stupid. That's absolutely not true. And living together is a damn big commitment, you know? I personally have lived with a partner before, a long-term partner, and we chose to do that not because of convenience, but because we were committed to each other and wanted to build a life together. We didn't need marriage to do that. We were still very committed. But now, as I got older, and now that I am older, I realize that that's not the lifestyle I want. It's not what I wanted then. It's not what works for me. It's just not for me. And that's okay. I don't want to live with someone because I like my personal space too much. I like my time alone to recharge. But I do still want a committed relationship with someone who We're committed to each other, we support each other emotionally, we build each other up, we have fun together. I also want all that without marriage. That's what I have. It is a serious, committed, loving relationship that we went into very intentionally and very thoughtfully and made sure we had completely shared core values and goals before we did. It is based on a real deep love, it's just non-traditional. In terms of outcomes and what we both get out of it, it's exactly what Lauren says we should be aiming for, but because we're doing it in a way that doesn't fit her picture of what it should look like, she would clearly put it down and try and demonize it and say that it's not real. Stupid. Lauren still wants us and everyone else in the world to conform to her idea of what relationships look like. And while there are some things that she's right about, for example, the fact that for a real quality long-term relationship, intentionally making sure you share values and goals, that is important. She's right about that. But what she's wrong about is the fact that the way this looks to different people isn't always the same, and that is okay. And what Lauren also fails to realize is that not everyone wants a long-term relationship at all. Not everyone wants to build a life with someone. Plenty of people are perfectly happy doing that alone, and for them, those casual hookups that she's so dismissive of can be very, very fulfilling to them. We shouldn't diminish what is fulfilling to people just because it's different to what is fulfilling to us. And of course, we also have to remember that there are plenty of people out there who don't want any kind of relationship, romantic or sexual or whatever, and that is okay and normal too. That is what is fulfilling to them. And again, we shouldn't be pushing them into, ooh, you need to do marriage and kids, blah, 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 when the idea of that would be absolutely horrific to them. I do agree that we would all be happier if we all stop and think, what do I want right now in life? What do I want long term? How do I go about finding that? We do need to be, I think, maybe a little bit more intentional in how we live our lives sometimes, but we don't all need to have the same answers to those questions. Marriage isn't the be-all and end-all, it doesn't have to be the ultimate goal, it's not the only way to have a proper relationship. I don't know how many times I need to say this. I am repeating myself a fair bit now.
The problem with so many dating relationships is that people enter them with completely different understandings of what the ideal outcome should be. He wants X and she wants Y, and it's easy to get distracted and fooled by superficial compatibility. They're thrilled they both like kombucha, kayaking, and karaoke on the weekends. That's all great, but when do you get down to the stuff that really matters over the long run? Stuff like marriage, family, faith, and values.
Yeah, you know, actually, in some ways, I agree with this point, actually. I do think it's really important to communicate and be on the same page from the get-go. While I was single, there were far too many people out there, mostly men, who, when they found out I didn't want kids, but they did want kids or they already had kids, they would then try to convince me to date them anyway. They told me I would change my mind. It would be different with them. They would be the exception, and it was hell. I could not deal with it. It got to me so much. One of my core values is that I am child-free by choice. That is very important to me and my lifestyle. It's what I need in my life, it's what I want for my life, and it's very important to me that if I have a partner, they need to be child-free as well. And there was no point in me wasting my time with someone that I had no future with because we had very, very, very different contrasting core values in that respect, you know? I mean, like, it was literally so important to me that I asked Kieran about his views on kids literally the night that I met him, you know? Like, proper, get it out the way. And this was like, you know, before we'd ever been on a date or anything, we'd literally just met and I was like, he's pretty, let's see what he thinks. Because it was important to me to, like, before even thinking about the possibility of potentially pursuing something, to see if we might be on the same page. And I know it's probably too early for some people, but it worked for me and it worked for us and it was good. It was good. Point is, figure out what you're all looking for and find someone who you're on the same page with, you know, and go from there so no one gets hurt.
I have no doubt the reason so many women get stuck in dead-end relationships is that it has become taboo, or to be precise, not politically correct, for a woman to articulate what she really wants.
You know, part of me actually agrees with Lauren here, but I reckon we probably have different reasons for this. I would say that this is because women had been told to shut up for so long by people like Lauren and other misogynists, by conservatives, by fundies. You know, sit down, shut up, sit still, look pretty, never express yourself, let the man lead, be submissive, you don't get a choice. That's why I think so many women have found themselves in dead-end relationships that they're too scared to leave because they've never been told they have the power to choose. Even today, we still get told our standards are too high when we're just like, oh, I just want someone who wants the same things as me. Too high, me. Women are being too fussy. I hate it. And again, I also think one of the reasons that just people in general get stuck in these dead-end relationships aren't working is because so many people like Lauren keep pushing this idea that there is only one way to be in a relationship. There's only one right way to do relationships. And when that's not something you want, it can be scary for people of any gender to speak up about this and ask for something different when they've been told for so long there's only one right way to do things, and that's not the right way for them. It's hard to break the mold, it really is. So yeah, you're right, there is that problem there, Lauren, but you are one of the ones causing it.
Which takes me back to marriage and why women crave it. Here are 3 reasons: protection, commitment, love.
I guess this is why I don't crave marriage then. I don't need anyone to protect me. I already have commitment and love without it. Perfect, sorted. I kind of have to ask it, like, what can marriage really give me that I can't just get out of a fulfilling long-term relationship in general? I mean, it seems like a lot of effort, you know, extra legal requirements to fulfill, in terms of, like, you know, doing the forms and the blah, 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 and all that rubbish. If either of us ever want to leave, it's just more difficult, and since I earn more, I'd probably lose a crap ton of money. Why would I want that? Why would I want to risk being screwed over financially? I already have enough to fulfill my needs and for my partner to fulfill his needs without a marriage. I have a committed partner. We love each other, we support each other, we have fun together, we are building a lovely, if unconventional, life together. I have everything I need, so why do I need to be married?
Little wonder, study after study shows that those in good marriages are happier, healthier, even wealthier than those who are not.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a source for this, please. And also, please clarify, what do you mean? Because this is a very, very vague statement. Are you saying they're happier than people in unhappy marriages? Are you saying they're happier than single people? Are you saying they're happier than people who are in relationships not married? Happier than who? Be more specific. And also, while I can't exactly fact check her actual source for this because she didn't give one, I can fact check based on other sources and other studies, and I can say that this is not really true at all. As I've quoted many times before, Paul Dolan, a professor of behavioural sciences at the London School of Economics, suggests that data from longitudinal studies shows that, and I quote, unmarried and childless women are the happiest subgroup in the population. He does note that other studies have measured some financial and health benefits in being married for both men and women on average, which Dolan said could be attributed to higher incomes and emotional support, but goes on to clarify that most of these benefits are actually to men and aren't really all that likely to increase women's health or happiness all that much. Furthermore, in Jenny Tate's 2018 book, How to Be Single and Happy, she writes of a study carried out by Michigan State University Professor Richard Lucas and his colleagues who found that, and again I quote, on average, people only get a very small boost from marriage, approximately 1/10 of 1 point on an 11-point scale. That's a mere 1%. The authors share the unsexy finding that there were as many people who ended up less happy after marriage as there were people who reported being more content. This suggests that even though a lot of people expected marriage to be a big boost to their happiness, most of what decided whether they're actually happy or not was contributed by other factors in their life, which basically means marriage won't fix everything. You may or may not be happy while you're married, but the marriage itself isn't necessarily making everything better, you know? Does that make sense? I don't know, words, I'm tired. Tate's also quotes a study from sociologist David Johnson at the Pennsylvania State University, who, according to her, suggests that many people who marry and stay married tend to report feeling above average life satisfaction before they wed, which again supports the idea that marriage arises from happiness, not the other way around. So I'm going to heavily doubt the oversimplified claims of Lauren and PragerU here, which lack both nuance and any evidence at all.
What's the difference between living with someone and marriage? It's the difference between referring to the man in your life as my boyfriend, significant other, or partner, and referring to him as my husband, and him referring to you as my wife, as compared with my girlfriend. Ask anyone who has taken the plunge and they'll tell you, living together and marriage have little in common.
Okay, one, they are just titles, and guess what? They're social constructs. This means that the meaning and value of those titles will differ from person to person, from culture to culture, from society to society. For me, there is little difference between husband and partner. When I talk about my partner, everyone in my life knows to take it seriously. Everyone in my life does take it seriously. They take it as seriously as if I said husband, because partner is a big, important word to me. It means a lot. He's my emergency contact for important things, like last month when I ended up in the hospital unexpectedly. He was my emergency contact. My parents treat him exactly the same as my siblings' wives. My siblings still treat him as a brother-in-law. There's no difference to any of us in the family. He is one of us. We don't need a marriage certificate to, I don't know, not change anything. And two, I know plenty of people who got married after living together for a while. I think all except one couple I know lived together, then got married, and every single one of them said it made no difference to their day-to-day lives. It was a nice thing for them, they wanted the celebration, but it didn't really change much in their actual lives. And I get hundreds, probably thousands of comments a year actually, from people telling me the exact same thing.
The latter, with its commitments, obligations, and expectations, means a lot more. To someone who tells you that a marriage license is trivial, just a piece of paper, here's a good response. If it's just a piece of paper, why are you so reluctant to sign it?
Again, one, all long-term relationships have those things, not just marriages. And two, because I don't want to, don't need to, seems like a lot of hassle, takes a lot of time, doesn't offer any other benefits. And again, if I ever want to leave, I don't really fancy having to pay out a crap ton of money to Kieran and lawyers, and it'd just be a lot easier if we could both just move on to the next stage of our lives and not just drag it all out unnecessarily, you know? Not that we're ever planning to break up, but I just think it's good to be practical, you know? I feel safer knowing that it's an option, and it's a manageable option. And I think in that way, it makes our commitment to each other a lot more special to me, because we do literally wake up every single day and choose to be with each other. We're not together out of obligation or because we have no other choice. If he wants to leave me, he absolutely can do. And if I want to leave him, I absolutely can do as well. There's nothing legally or officially tying us together. We're together because we want to be. And that to me is really, really romantic. I love that. It means so much more and it's so much more special. And because of the strong bond we have, I'm not scared of him leaving me. I'm not worried about it. And I know he feels the same about me, because even though we can, we also know that we don't want to, you know? It's kind of like, think of it as like when I take Kyra to the park and I take her off the lead. She has the option to run away and not come back, but I know she's not going to because she loves me and she loves our life together. It's that level of trust, you know? And that's a lot more special, and it makes our bond a lot more special than if I had to keep her tied tightly on the lead the whole time, otherwise she'd run away and I'd never see her again. You know? I'll be honest, her argument here of like, why won't you get married? You scared? You chicken? It sounds a lot like childish peer pressure, you know? She sounds like one of those mean girls at school who think she's being all clever, but really she's just a loud bully. It's kind of like, what's something I'm indifferent to? Pears. I'm indifferent to pears. I feel like I don't remember the last time I ate a pear. I don't dislike pears. I just don't really like them either. It's like Lauren saying like, well, if there's nothing wrong with pears, if they're not so awful, they're not so horrible, you don't have a problem with it, why don't you go eat a pear? I'm like, well, because that's a lot of hassle for something that isn't really going to give me much reward. I'm going to have to go put my shoes on, go all the way to the shop. They might not even have pears there. I'll have to go to the other shop. I'll have to pick out some pears, have to buy the pears, carry the pears home, prepare the pears. You wash them, you peel them, you eat them, you get all the pear juice on your hands, and all for what? I don't even like pears that much. I'd rather just, I don't know, eat an apple from the bowl. Do you see what I mean? Anyway, thankfully that was a short video and it's over, and I feel at this point I'm really starting to understand why she calls her show on YouTube pseudo-intellectual, because that is exactly what she is. It is an incredibly accurate title. I am confused why she chose it. I don't really get why she's promoting her stupidity as a selling point, but I don't know, it fits. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe she meant it ironically, but it's not really ironic if she actually is a pseudo-intellectual, is it? I don't know. Okay, on to the next random video. This is the last one we're going to be looking at today because I was starting to get exhausted when I was writing this script. And this ended up being like way heavier than I expected it to be. There was more research in this than I expected. And yeah, I think this is going to be quite a chunky video actually. But like I say, if you want me to cover more of Lauren's videos in other videos after this, I am more than happy to. I just need a little break first. This one is called Feminists Are Petty and Whiny, so clearly more projection from her with that title. Let's give it a watch.
Now, for some time, I feel like most of us have understood that feminism, at least modern Western feminism, is no longer actually about securing women's rights or equality for women. Instead, now, more often than not, the term feminism is used to describe middle-class or upper-middle-class women complaining about people who happen to be men and trying to turn it into this larger societal, cultural problem when really it's like, no, honey, this is a you problem. This is something you should probably figure out within your own life rather than trying to drag the rest of us into it and make it seem like it's this big cultural problem we all have to solve.
Well, that is just a clear, complete misunderstanding of what feminism is and what it's all about. This is just like when young dumb honeybun was like, well, I've never been oppressed and therefore none of us need feminism, and it was so stupid, so narrow-minded, short-sighted and self-centered, just as this is.
Because it got to a point where no one else had to tell me that, but I had to stand there and say, okay, you say things like, you hate all men. Do you hate your father? No, God no, he's the most hard-working, loving man I've ever known. Do you hate your brothers? Do you hate your fiancé? Do you hate your male friends? Well, no. So how can you say that? And I know that this is maybe like a little example, but it starts at the roots. How can you say that? How can you say such a generalized thing?
It's like, tell me you don't understand feminism without saying you don't understand feminism.
Are you oppressed right now? Well, it depends what you mean. Well, have you ever felt oppressed? Well, no. Have you ever been denied opportunities because you're a woman? No. Have you ever been denied opportunities because you are an immigrant and a woman? Well, no. I've actually become exactly who I want to be, and I have been granted so many more opportunities because I was a woman and because I am an immigrant. And so, what are you talking about right now? We're not talking about globally, we're talking about right now in your everyday life. What is it that supports your logic of I hate all men, they are the evil of the society, I am oppressed because I am a woman and I have been denied all of these opportunities, when you yourself can admit that in your life that has not directly disadvantaged you? How dare you say that? And I felt so terrible about it, and I sat there thinking about these things, reading books and, you know, watching videos and thinking about this and questioning what I've been saying all this time, and I thought, I can't defend this. You're right, me. I can't defend this. I can't say stuff like that because it's not true.
Okay, and if that's the case, that is great for you. I'm happy for you, seriously. But you know these opportunities that you think you're getting just because you're a woman? You're getting them because of feminism. Thanks to feminism. I said in my I Don't Need Feminism video, which is aimed at exactly these sorts of people, feminism isn't about just a bunch of rich white women sitting around complaining about men. Women around the world are still facing constant oppression and living in danger, and we need to speak out about that and do something about it. That is why we still need feminism. In that video, and I will leave it linked below if you want to check it out, because I think it's a very good video. It took a lot of research. It covers some really important topics, but I feel like it's just not really like a clickbaity title, so it hasn't got that many views. But I said in that video how once upon a time feminism was very much the domain of white, rich, cis, straight women. But if we're talking about modern feminism, I would argue that we're actually understanding more and more about the importance of feminism being intersectional. As I've said before, and again I'm kind of like quoting myself a little bit here, historically in many Western countries, feminist voices have predominantly been white, middle-class, cisgendered women. And so feminism has focused predominantly on their needs, which is fine. Their needs are important. Except it's caused the differing needs of women of colour, trans women, poorer women, women with disabilities, to name just a few, to be, if not completely silenced, then at least considerably overshadowed and ignored, and that is not at all okay. This needs to change. It's not equality until we have equality for every woman, not just a select few. In that video, I referenced Mickey Kendall's fantastic book, Hood Feminism, which again, I thoroughly recommend, in which she writes, "There's nothing feminist about having so many resources at your fingertips and choosing to be ignorant. Nothing empowering or enlightening in deciding that intent trumps impact, especially when the consequences aren't going to be experienced by you, but will instead be experienced by someone from a marginalized community." Chandra Talpade Mahanti writes that we need to recognize that sexism, racism, misogyny, and heterosexism underlie and fuel social and political institutions of rule, and thus often lead to hatred of women and supposedly justified violence against women. The interwoven process of sexism, racism, misogyny, and heterosexism are an integral part of our social fabric, wherever in the world we happen to be. Feminists today, we're not just sitting around having a whine about men for funsies, you know? We're trying to talk about real issues affecting real women around the world. And people like Lauren, who are willfully misrepresenting what feminism is about, are doing real damage to that, and in turn, hurting real people. She is a danger to women. And I don't think that's an exaggeration to say. We absolutely need to stand up for the rights of trans women who face disproportionate amounts of violence, lower income, housing problems, difficulty accessing medical care. We need to speak up for women of colour who have to deal with racism on top of sexism and are more likely to die in childbirth or have their pain or other health conditions taken less seriously than anyone. Women in different countries whose laws stop them living as independent adults, who don't allow them a real education or any freedom. Women who suffer because of religious fundamentalism. Women who are trafficked and forced into sex slavery. Victims of child marriage. Victims of female genital mutilation. Women with low incomes, women with disabilities, women who are victims of domestic violence, women in general who are underdiagnosed and undertreated in the healthcare system, women who struggle day to day because the average of things is actually the average of men and not women. For example, when it comes to car seatbelts, car seats, protective gear in workplaces, they're all designed for the average man, and that often puts women's bodies in danger. Women who still do far more unpaid labour than men, women who disproportionately struggle due to issues around pregnancy, childcare, maternity leave, and getting any support with any of that. How women in politics are still not taken as seriously as men, despite often achieving better results than them. How women are still judged and objectified based on the way they look. Women who are sexually assaulted at considerably higher rates than men, and yet still not likely to be believed. Women who have their bodily autonomy and sexual health rights taken away from them on a daily basis. Neurodivergent women who still remain undiagnosed, and when we are, we're not taken as seriously because, again, the average neurodivergent person is a man. It's based on what's average for men. Our symptoms are often so overlooked because we don't, on average, present in the same way that men do. And of course, women in countries with disturbingly high rates of femicide, for example Honduras, where a woman is murdered by a man on average every 18 hours, but only 10% of the men responsible for those murders are ever convicted, and so many more women. This is a real problem worldwide, and we need to speak up for those people. So no, it's not just a bunch of privileged white women sitting around having a giggle and a moan about like, oh, you'll not believe what Tom down the hall said to me the other day. These are real issues affecting real women who are in danger. Lauren is missing the point entirely, and that harms real people. I get quite passionate about this.
First up, we have this one, where someone comments that the conservative sub actually terrifies me, LMAO. And what could have possibly gotten her so scared over on the conservative subreddit? Well, the horror of a post saying, get married, make babies. Honestly, sometimes I do get feminists on my videos commenting that, oh, feminism isn't anti-family, stop trying to make it out like it is. But it's like, do you listen to yourselves or your fellow feminists? Because it absolutely is anti-family.
Do you ever listen to feminists, Lauren? Do you? Because I really don't believe you do. I do not. Here are a few topics that I, as a feminist, have spoken about. Here are a few topics which I, as a feminist, have spoken about at length over the last year. Please tell me how they are in any way anti-family. 1. According to UNICEF Child Marriage Database, every single year 12 million girls are married before the age of 18 around the world. More than 650 million women who are alive today were married off before they were 18, even though it wasn't their choice, and they have suffered as a consequence of it. Us women want to put a stop to child marriage worldwide and protect children. How is that anti-family? 2, as I said earlier in this video, every year across the world, at least 3 million girls, usually between the ages of 4 and 16, have their genitals mutilated. There are currently estimated to be between 130 and 200 million women living with the consequences of this horrific procedure all around the world. Immediate effects of this can cause pain, bleeding, infection, and death. But long term, this can also result in severe pain when having sex, difficulty having sex, decreased sexual pleasure, infertility, major dangers during childbirth, including but not limited to needing a cesarean section, postpartum hemorrhage, episiotomy, extended maternal hospital stay, resuscitation of the infant, and inpatient perinatal death. We feminists would like an end put to this barbaric, we need an end put to this barbaric practice, so women are no longer only valued by their perceived purity level and can finally have a happy, healthy, sexually pleasurable marriage and relationship, and can have kids if they want to without risking death or their babies' lives. Tell me how that is anti-family. 3, while things are improving on the whole, there is still a hell of a long way to go in regards to women being disproportionately affected by having children. Not only do they have to go through the act of giving birth, when they do, there are still so many countries around the world that don't provide enough maternity leave or make childcare affordable enough for women to be able to go back to work. Single mothers in particular are negatively affected so badly. Us feminists absolutely want better support for parents, especially single mothers, so that in general mothers have more support, can afford to properly financially support their children, and can actually have the choice whether they want to work or have kids or both without being forced one way or another due to circumstances. We are trying to support mothers and parents and families. How is that anti-family? Number 4. We want women to have easily accessible, affordable, and reliable birth control and access to abortions when necessary, so that women and people with uteruses can choose exactly when, why, and if they want to have children. This is not saying we don't value people having children. We are just saying that we want people to have the choice. Unwanted pregnancies don't always, but can disproportionately lead to child abuse, neglect, children growing up in poverty, and so much more harm. For the happiest and healthiest children, people should be able to choose if, when, and why they bring them into the world. Every pregnancy should be wanted. Every pregnancy should be a joy. Every pregnancy should lead to a child living their best life. That is what we want. How is that anti-family? 5, and this is one that is very, very close to my heart. We want to help victims of domestic violence and intimate partners abuse to survive and thrive and heal. This is something that has affected me personally, and since last month I have been using some of my income from the Bethany Beal sex course video to donate to Refuge, a charity which helps women and children escaping from domestic violence. This is keeping families safe. How is that anti-family? My voice is going a bit now, I'm getting emotional. And 6. Last but not least, and this is absolutely not an exhaustive list, the stats I've quoted a million times in a million videos this year. According to Caroline Creator Perez's book Invisible Women, the US has the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world, and this is even worse for African Americans. Caroline writes, African American women are 243% more likely than white women to die from pregnancy and childbirth related issues. You can find out more details about this in my video on Carissa Collins, and I think my most recent response to Classically Abby as well, if you want more details. But by wanting better healthcare for women of colour in particular, and pregnant people in particular, we are literally wanting to keep people safe and keep families together so mothers don't die. How is that anti-family? Sure, we also believe that everyone should get a choice over what kind of relationship they want, if at all, and whether they have kids or not, but none of that is anti-family. To say it is just antagonistic nonsense for the sake of being a contrarian, pandering to misogynistic men. Anyway, after all of that, I am going to need to stop and have a drink of water. Back to Lauren's video, where again, she misses the point of everything, because once again, I'm not sure she actually understands half the words she's saying. She definitely doesn't understand any of the larger concepts she's talking about, but Give this a listen.
And in fact, the comments on this post are no better. It's very much giving just stop being poor energy. A couple should absolutely not have to give up their entire lifestyle because brainless conservatives are convinced everyone needs to have a child. It's so ironic because on the one hand, feminism criticizes capitalism all the time, but at the same time, feminists are always like, no, I don't want to give up travel and my avocado toast to, you know, just have a family and pursue meaning, because how could I?
God, where do I even start with this mess? So when the first commenter says that couples and even individuals shouldn't have to give up their lives to have a kid someone else says they should have, that's not necessarily referring to them having to give up or keep money or possessions. It could be any part of their life. There is a lot more to someone's lifestyle than their money and possessions. Shocks me that Lauren doesn't realise that. It could be any part of their life. For example, a couple or person valuing their romantic relationship and wanting to spend most of their time or energy on that. It could be a person who wants to spend their time looking after aging relatives instead of bringing children into the world. Some people find value in their work or arts instead of raising babies. And by that, I don't just mean, CD, when you make more money. I mean, and this might be hard for Lauren to understand, some people actually find meaning in their work and do good in the world that helps other people. You know, some people work as doctors, some people work in social services, some people work with children, some people help refugees, some people are foster carers, some people work with victims of domestic violence, some people help animals, some people work in politics to help bring about positive change in the world. Some people create literature and art which can give people hope and help educate people. Some people are educators. Some people don't want to have to give up helping hundreds, potentially thousands or millions of people because everyone else is telling them they need to have a baby that they don't want. As we mentioned very briefly earlier, yeah, a lot of people do have to give up work when they have a kid because there just isn't adequate help with childcare. Take another example. Some people have ongoing health issues, whether that's physical or mental, and some people are only just managing to get through their day. Some people found coping mechanisms and treatments to help them, but for a lot of people, pregnancy and childcare would stop this. Pregnancy and childcare would make their lives unbearable. For example, people with bipolar have to stop taking their medication when they get pregnant, or some people with chronic pain issues are unable to raise a baby whilst literally in constant pain themselves. For these people, the lifestyle they're giving up isn't just, oh my god, look at all these money and possessions. Their lifestyle that they've been giving up is managing to get through a day without wanting to die. Do you really think people should be forced to give that up just to raise a child they never wanted in the first place? And finally, one last example, but there are plenty more out there. People or couples with very low incomes who may be relying on government support to get through the day. For a lot of those people, if they were forced to have a kid, the lifestyle they would be giving up is, you know, the ability to feed themselves, or heat their homes, or have a roof over their heads. I remember when I was a kid, my mum sometimes having to like skip meals to make sure I was fed, or, you know, her crying because we couldn't afford to pay the heating bill that month, or because she was constantly living in an overdraft and stuff like that. When people have the choice to say, yeah, you know what, I'm struggling to get by so much that I don't want to bring a kid into this, I would rather live a life where I can just about manage to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. I don't think there's anything selfish about that. There is nothing unreasonable about it. When people say a kid wouldn't fit their lifestyle, they don't want to give up a lifestyle for their kid, that doesn't necessarily mean they're being shallow and selfish and materialistic. Sometimes it just means, you know what, they'd like to keep surviving, and there is nothing wrong with that. Not everyone in this world is as privileged as Lauren. We didn't all grow up travelling around the world with our rich parents. You know, we put us in expensive international schools. Some of us actually grew up knowing what no money feels like. Okay, on to her next point about feminists criticising capitalism. And again, I don't think she understands what she's talking about. It's as simple as that. I don't think she understands why feminists criticise capitalism or what that criticism is. It's not about, oh, you know, spending money is bad. Having any money ever is so bad. No, what we're actually criticising is the exploitation of working classes, which again is clearly something Lauren knows nothing about. You're safe, I got you. This little one was having a grumble at me. I think she needed some attention. You gonna talk about capitalism with me? Yeah? Love you. Throughout history, but becoming especially prominent during industrialization, the working classes have always been exploited by the rich. And when I say working classes, I mean men, women, and children. Amongst the working classes, as many women as men were working hard labour in mines, in factories, on farms. I've spoken about this before, but I literally had ancestors who were women, who were nail makers, factory workers, farmers. I literally had a relative who was a 10-year-old girl who died in the Husker Pit disaster, which was this mining disaster where a flood caused, I think it was something like about 50 children to die. Working class women and children have always had to do the same hard work as men. That is just a fact. And ultimately what it all comes back to is the working class people being constantly screwed over while the rich keep getting richer off our backs. The only people who can afford avocado and toast in world travel, like Lauren talks about, are the middle and upper classes, but she's forgotten about the millions of people who don't have all of that and still need feminism. I personally see myself as an example of how feminism and good social policies introduced by the Labour Party has helped working class women. My family has lived in Yorkshire for, God, at least since back to like the 1600s. We are a family that have never had any money, never had any resources, but over the years, as women in society in general have been allowed to get more and more education and aren't discriminated against in the same way, that has helped me break a pattern in my family that has lasted for at least 400 years. Now, don't get me wrong, I still had to go through a lot that, you know, other people, richer families, richer kids didn't. Like, I had to get my first job at 14, I worked 2 jobs while I was at sixth form, but at least I had opportunities to break out and get out of there, you know? The government also helped me out with EMA, which is Educational Maintenance Allowance between the ages of 16 and 18, which gave me, I think it was £30 a week for every week I was in full-time education. That helped with paying for things like food, school supplies, stuff like that. And then when I was 18, I was able to go to university. Me and my brother were the first people in my family to ever go to university. I mean, me and my brother and sister were the first people in my family to ever go to school past the age of 15, but you know, me and my brother were the first ones to ever go to university. I was the first woman in my family to ever go to a university. Do you know what a big, massive achievement that is? It is wonderful. And that was only possible because, unlike all my ancestors, I'd had access to an education that was equal to a man's, and I had access to an education that was equal to the middle classes. Well, maybe not my secondary school, but let's not talk about that. But in terms of university, yeah. When I did decide I wanted to go to university, yeah, I had to work ridiculously hard for it. But I was able to have my own bank account, which is something that wasn't even a thing just 18 years before I was born. I was able to get a maintenance grant as support from the government because I came from a low-income background. I was able to get into one of the best universities in the country because they offered an extra bursary for students from low-income backgrounds with exceptional grades, which I qualified for. Like I say, this wasn't like things were just handed to me for funsies. I had to work for it, and I worked, you know. Working 2 jobs or in full-time education is not easy. And everything I got was reliant on me keeping my grades up, and I kept them up. Like, we're talking full marks in a lot of exams. So I'm not saying these things were just handed to me. I earned them, I worked for them. But the point I'm saying is that thanks to good social policy that was helping me out, and thanks to feminism, unlike every single woman that came before me in my family, I was finally allowed access to the same opportunities as men from the middle and upper class families. I was able to fight alongside them and earn my place. And that is what we want. We're not asking to be given everything, but we want access to a level playing field. And I was lucky that I got that, and I am grateful that I got that. I was able to do that, get my Bachelor of Science, and now I'm actually able to make good money for myself and not just minimum wage working a local shop or a farm or a factory like my ancestors. I am a success story of what feminism can do when we allow women access to those opportunities and low-income people access to those opportunities. But the problem is, not everyone has that still, and we need to keep fighting for it until it actually is a level playing field for every single person. Not everyone had what I had, and today not everyone has what I had. There are still countries around the world who do not provide that kind of support for working class kids and families. There are countries around the world that do not allow access to those opportunities for women. Even in the UK, since the Tories have been in power, they have done all they can to take away support and screw over working class people again and again and again, and we need to speak out about that. Today, the gap between the richest and poorest members of societies is bigger than almost ever, I think. The minimum wage has not risen in line with general inflation. Government supports and benefits are not raising in line with the cost of living. And the people who are suffering from this are not the rich who, oh, do you have to cut back on a Starbucks trip? No, the people who are suffering are the working class people and the people who live in poverty who now have to choose between, well, can we pay our water bill this month or our electricity bill? Oh wait, we can't afford either. The cost of living is now extortionately high and the wages haven't risen in line with it. Benefits haven't risen in line with it. Social care hasn't risen in line with it. And that is not okay. And of course, women are disproportionately affected by this for a variety of reasons. We cannot deny that. Mickey Kendall writes about the effects of this in America, for example. She says 66% of American households struggling with hunger are headed by single mothers. Women and children account for over 70% of the nation's poor. When the obstacles you face vary by race and class, then so do your priorities. After all, for women who are struggling to keep themselves housed, fed and clothed, it's not a question of working hard enough. They're leaning in, but not in search of equal pay or having it all. Their quest for equal pay starts with equal access to education and opportunities. They need feminism to recognise that everything that affects women is a feminist issue, whether it be food insecurity or access to transit, schools or a living wage. She goes on to say, we judge the mothers who have to rely on food banks, free or reduced lunches at school, or food stamps for not being able to stand against a problem that baffles governments around the world. Indeed, we treat poverty itself like a crime. Like the women experience it are making bad choices for themselves and their children on purpose. We ignore that they don't have a good choice available, that they're making decisions in the space where the handholds are tenuous or non-existent. As a culture, we don't have sufficient provisions for helping women and families escape poverty. I'm lucky that I did have that escape route, but not all women have this. Not all people have this, and this is something we need to talk about. Kendall goes on to say, in fact, we often create artificial and unnecessary barriers, like limiting unemployment insurance to full-time workers, which leaves part-time workers with no assistance if they lose their jobs. We rely on charities to address acute hardships like hunger before food stamps come in, and to respond to the homeless crisis when HUD has a waiting list that can span decades in some areas. Is it possible to work a full-time job when you can't even afford part-time childcare? Or is this a policy guaranteed to create even higher hurdles? Paid maternity leave is a wonderful cause, but what happens after the baby's born and you weren't making enough money to support one person, much less navigate these new higher expenses? Alleviating women's poverty is a critical feminist issue, and I couldn't agree with Kendall more. If you do want to find out more about this issue, then I really, really recommend her book, Hood Feminism, which focuses on how feminism cannot just be for cis, white, rich women, but needs to focus on the differing needs of trans women, gay and bisexual women, asexual women, women with disabilities, women of colour, women with lower incomes, and so on. I reckon Lauren could really have her eyes opened if she bothered to challenge herself and engage in a book like this and realise what the real world is like for so many women. That book in particular was an eye-opener for me in terms of what it's like for low-class women in America. I obviously know what it's like in the UK, but I didn't know about in America. So one of the big things that shocked me, sadly, is that statistics around the world show that domestic violence is more common in working class communities. But in America, the rate of women being killed in domestic violence incidents in the working class community is even higher because there are more illegal firearms in those areas which are used against the women. Being in the UK, the difference in gun availability is something that I hadn't even considered before, and that was why it was so shocking to me. But that is exactly why we need to listen to other women's experiences and understand that there are people out there who have very different lives to our own, and their experiences are just as important, and we need to learn from them and listen to them and help them. We don't get equality until everyone gets equality. I'm just going to take the little crying bee now because the baby needs a pee. Sorry, I'll be back. And the other big important thing to remember is that this isn't just a Western issue. This isn't just a, oh, America, Canada, UK, blah, blah. No. Did you know that families living in poverty is one of the leading causes of child marriage? I'll leave some links about this in the source document for this video if you want to find out more. But according to a 2020 study by UNICEF, 12 million girls are married before the age of 18 each year. According to the charity Girls Not Brides, more than 650 million women alive today already suffer direct consequences of child marriage. They're going to tell us that child marriage is a complex issue. It is rooted in gender inequality and the belief that girls and women are inferior to boys and men. It is made worse by poverty, lack of education, harmful social norms and practices, and insecurity. Its drivers vary between communities, and it looks different across and within regions and countries. It is basically an awful cycle. Families in poverty are more likely to essentially sell their daughter into child marriage to secure her security. And then once married, the child is expected to drop out of school, to not get an education, not work, not achieve anything, not be independent in any way, which makes her in turn unable to actually get out of poverty. Then when she has daughters of her own, they potentially face the same fate. As Girls Not Brides reports, nearly 40% of girls in the world's poorest countries are married as children. That is twice the global average. The report goes on to say, when experiencing acute poverty, families and sometimes girls themselves see marriage as a way to reduce family costs and gain financial security. This idea is reinforced by patriarchal norms that devalue and commodify girls. Because girls have less access to education and low social, political, and economic status, they are often economically dependent on men. They may see marriage as their only option. The Women's Refuge Commission published a report titled A Feminist Vision for Ending Child Marriage in East Africa Roadmap, which warned of the dangers of child marriage. They write, the consequences of not addressing child marriage are devastating for adolescent girls, with pregnancy and childbirth-related complications leading causes of death and injury for child mothers and associated with decreased survival of their infants. In addition, the consequences of child marriage carry lifelong impacts related to increased rates of intimate partner violence and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, poorer overall psychological well-being, and reduced earning potential as a result of school dropout and reduced alternative vocational opportunities. They then offer a whole bunch of ideas of how we can help these communities and therefore the children. And one of the biggest focuses is on reducing and lowering rates of poverty and making sure young girls actually have decent access to healthcare and, most importantly, education. So yeah, sorry Lauren if you think that criticising capitalism is a bad thing, but I entirely disagree, and no matter how much you mock, I and other feminists are not going to stop doing it just because you seem to think every woman's life revolves around avocado toast. I don't even like avocado. But you know what I don't like more than avocado? Children growing up in poverty, women's work being exploited, and child marriage. Oh, and on Lauren's final point there about how she thinks the only way to pursue meaning in life is by popping out a baby, that just makes me feel really sorry for her. Like, I'm glad she found some meaning in life by that, but for the rest of us, we do find it in other places too. You are not the only one with a meaningful life, and having a baby is not the only way to have a meaningful life. I mean, that in itself feels really, really offensive to infertile people who do want kids, saying like, oh, you can't have a kid? Guess your life will never have meaning. That is harmful, that is damaging, and it's utter nonsense. Lauren then gets stupider.
And that's not to mention the numerous other replies to this post saying that people in the past didn't really value family and children. The real reason our ancestors had so many kids was because no birth control, just because more religion said so. Of course, you had a farm, so you just needed help. And that's not to mention child mortality rates. This is just cope, in my opinion, of feminists trying to make it seem like, no, families actually aren't this amazing, beautiful, meaningful thing. It's just that they wanted the child labor. It's like, no. If that were the case, families who didn't have farms would have smaller families. It's like, look, if you want to die alone with your cats and your expensive MacBook, just say so, but stop trying to bring down the tradition of families when obviously the only reason you're not pursuing one yourself is for selfish means.
Lauren, you just got told the reason, like you literally just read it out. Because they didn't have birth control. I don't know how you can be this just like unaware of basic history. Throughout the entirety of history, there have been a mix of people, some who love kids and want a lot, some who love kids and want a few, some who may or may not love kids but don't want any. The problem is that before birth control, legal abortion, proper healthcare and sanitation, and of course fertility treatments, people didn't really have a choice on whether they had kids or not, or how many kids they had. Lauren's silly comments here just showed to me she knows absolutely nothing about the history of women's healthcare. It is a very complex topic, but a very fascinating one. Horrifying at times, but fascinating. And we are talking about issues here that were affecting people not all that long ago. They affected my mother, they affected my grandparents. Like, yeah. I mean, just look back at my family history. My dad was one of 6 kids. I think my grandma was one of 11, and so on. I come from a big, big family with lots and lots of kids, you know? And interestingly, as we've moved on in time, the families and amount of children have got smaller and smaller because us women finally have a choice over how many we want or don't want. I come from a big family because in the past, women didn't have access to birth control, so they had no choice over whether they got pregnant or not. There are also, sadly, a hell of a lot of stillbirths in my family's history, and also, sadly, a hell of a lot of women who died in childbirth. Because when you live in poverty and you don't live in sanitary conditions or have regular food or, even decent food, it is very easy for childbirth to kill you and or your babies. It is very easy for newborn babies to pick up infections and illnesses and die from them. Richer families were more likely to have children who survived, but poorer families were more likely to have more children in general and kind of on purpose because they wanted to keep having children to send out to work because they needed bigger families for more income. Overall, with poorer families having more children dying, but rich ones having more surviving, but having, to some extent, I guess you could say, a choice over how many they had, it meant lots of people had big families. Everyone did, essentially. We also have to consider abortions. Whether you like them or not, whether you would have one yourself or not, abortions have been around as long as humans have. As long as people have been getting pregnant, there have been people who did not want to be pregnant. It's only in the last few years that abortion has become safe and legal. Even before then, though, it was still done. It was just done in secret, where there was major risk of infection and illnesses and death, or in some cases, it just not working, and you ending up with a baby with deformities or illnesses or disabilities or all kinds of awful stuff. Awful for the baby, I mean, not disabilities. You know what I'm trying to say, you know what I mean. No one wants a baby to be ill at all. Many, many women died from abortions, but that doesn't make abortion inherently wrong. It simply highlights the need for them to be carried out as early as possible in safe, clean, and legal conditions. I think a lot of people like Lauren, who have never lived in or seen those conditions, struggle to understand why people would want an illegal, dangerous abortion. But you have to understand how desperate these women were. It was a last resort for them. And honestly, the risk of death was worth it to them, because living without that pregnancy was too much. It was too hard. It was worth the risk. Do you know how desperate people have to be to go through with that? If, like Lauren, you cannot be bothered to pick up a history book and you would like something kind of easier to digest, I'd really recommend watching the drama called Midwife, which, while fictional, is absolutely based on Britain's medical history, specifically women's health, It follows a bunch of midwives in like proper working class poplar from just after the war into the early 60s, and all the changes that happened in medicine, specifically in regards to women's health during that time. And in quite a few episodes, you see women injured and dying after illegal abortions, which they felt they had to have, despite the risks, because they simply couldn't cope with bringing another child into the world. There were these women who were living in like grotty, one-bedroom, dirty houses, but they already had 10 kids to look after and couldn't feed another. So they had to risk trying to get an illegal abortion. They were that desperate. And I think it's only when you kind of see real people being affected by this and you start to kind of understand what they're going through that you're like, oh crap, that's why this is needed. At least anyone with a heart, I think, feels that way. Now, of course, while the introduction of birth control made life easier for a lot of women, the path to get there wasn't actually the best. It was incredibly problematic. In the UK, early methods of birth control were tested on working class women, so they were guinea pigs, while over in America, they outsourced their testing to poor women of colour in many Southern American countries. Sadly, in order to get the freedoms we have from birth control today, a lot of women were exploited in the process, and that is not okay. That is something we have to remember and learn from, and never ever let it happen again. However, this doesn't make birth control bad. We still need to understand that birth control as we have it today is an absolute gift of freedom for so many people. And not just because it gives them the right to choose whether they have kids or not, but because of the other many, many health benefits they offer. I'm currently having issues myself. You all know I've had bad period issues for a while, and the doctors are now finally taking it seriously after everything that's gone on recently with the ended up in hospital with the ovarian cyst and all the nightmares I've had. And I think it was while I was there and they were talking to me about everything in general, they finally realised how bad my pain is on my periods and everything like that. And they're like, oh crap, okay, we need to refer you for a coil. So I had an appointment 2-3 days ago to try and go and get the Marina coil fitted, and it turns out probably too much information, feel free to skip over this. I have a very, very small womb, too small, and a very small cervix. So it means the doctor couldn't fit the coil. So now I'm being referred to a gynecologist where they're going to try again with like a slightly different method of fitting it and see if that works. And if it doesn't, then they're gonna try and fit the, what's the other coil? This one they're trying is the Marina coil, which is good for 6 years. It used to be 5, it's 6 now. Good for 6 years and should ideally stop my periods entirely, if not just make them a lot lighter and hopefully stop all the pain. But if I get the other coil, then it only lasts for 3 years, which is annoying, but what can you do? And it doesn't stop your periods as much and it might not help with the pain as much, but at least it'll be birth control and it'll be doing something, so it should make them manageable, but it's just nightmare. Anyway, I'm going through all that in a minute. The point I was trying to make is birth control has a lot more benefits than just helping you decide if you want to have kids or not. Because if I can get this coil and it helps with my periods, that is literally going to change my life. Like, I don't think I can put into words how debilitating my periods are and how much not having a painful period would make my life better in every way. Seriously. Right, okay, I think that's all my points about birth control. And then there's that stupid line at the end about feminists just making it seem like families are wonderful. You know what, for some people, families aren't wonderful. They're not. I mean, I don't think that's what feminists are doing here, but let's be honest, for some people, they're not. That's just a fact. We can't deny it. Okay, here's an analogy for you about why choice is important. You know that scene in Matilda where Bruce Bogtrotter steals a piece of Trunchbull's chocolate cake because he just loves chocolate cake and he can't resist. And as a punishment, Trunchbull makes him sit on stage in front of the entire school and they all have to stay after school in detention and watch him eat this giant massive chocolate cake in one go. He's there, he's trying, he nearly pukes, and yeah, in the end he's triumphant and people cheer him on and everything like that. But that doesn't mean that what Trunchbull did to him was okay, does it? But it also doesn't mean that chocolate cake is inherently awful. We can acknowledge that what Trunchbull did was bad, while still acknowledging that chocolate cake can be good in the right circumstances when you have a choice. What we can say about both chocolate cake in this analogy and children and having a family in general is that you can have something that is great and wonderful and perfect, and some people still aren't going to like it and want it, and that is okay. Some people might like it a bit and just want it a little bit, and that's okay too. And some people might love it and do desperate things to get it. But the important thing is, people are only going to be happy with the outcome and get the most enjoyment out of it and find the most fulfillment in it when they choose for themselves exactly how much they have and when. Even when someone really loves chocolate cake so much, even when someone does eventually want a slice of chocolate cake, it's never okay to force multiple slices of chocolate cake on them. And it's definitely not okay to make an entire community suffer and have less resources, whether that be money, access to healthcare, education, government support, or free time in terms of detention, just because you're busy forcing chocolate cake on someone else. You know what I mean? And if you need me to spell it out for you, the same goes for children. A person choosing to have one or more children for themselves is a beautiful thing when it's their choice. A person having a pregnancy and children forced upon them at the expense of themselves, their health, and others is not a beautiful thing. How is that hard to understand? Context and choice matter. And finally, I don't know how many times I have to say this, no, not every child-free person is selfish, rich, or has cats. I know she's just being insulting because she thinks she's being edgy and witty, but it's not edgy, it's not witty, it's just a bit pathetic. It just shows how ill-informed, inarticulate, and ignorant Lauren is. That's all.
And next up, this one is a strange one. It's just an article that was shared titled Taxpayer Funding for Lying, the Crisis Pregnancy Center Story. There are more than 3 times the number of crisis pregnancy centers than there are abortion providers, according to the Guttmacher Institute. So something that we see from feminists and the pro-choice side of things a lot is that people who are against abortion aren't actually pro-life. They're just against abortion because once women do become pregnant, they don't give a crap about them. They don't want to help them.
Yeah, and I think Lauren's just proven this is true with all the ignorant rubbish she said so far in this video, and her absolute lack of awareness of why most people who don't want kids make that choice, and what life is really like for pregnant people living in poverty with ill health and so on, you know?
But obviously that's not true, and one of the best examples of how that's not true is the existence of crisis pregnancy centers.
Yeah, crisis pregnancy centers, which are well known for spreading misinformation to pregnant people in emotional and physical turmoil. Crisis pregnancy centers are bad. Like, they just are. Regardless of whether you yourself would ever have an abortion or not. I think it is very important for every person who faces the choice whether to continue a pregnancy or end it. I think it's very important for every single one of those people to have access to all the information possible in regards to all their options. This means explaining to them exactly what pregnancy means, what pregnancy will be like, what their life will be like after pregnancy, what support they will or won't receive, and also explain to them what adoption would be like, what support will be available for them then, what the pregnancy will be like then, what, trauma they may face from that if they choose to have an abortion. What is an abortion? How does it happen? What are the potential side effects? And so on. I fully believe everyone should be given all the information possible in order to allow each individual to weigh up their choices and make a decision that is best for them. Crisis pregnancy centres do not do this. That is a fact. They refuse to even consider abortion as an option, even when the person's life is at risk, even when a baby could be born severely hurting, in pain, ill, with deformities that would almost immediately kill them. They never even consider it an option. They willingly spread misinformation and flat out lie to people, and they do not offer enough support to people who have babies once that baby is born. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists openly say that crisis pregnancy centres are, and I quote, run by people who operate unethically and with the intention to dissuade, deter, or prevent them from seeking certain reproductive healthcare options. They go on to say that staff members at these unregulated and often non-medical facilities have no legal obligation to provide pregnant people with accurate information and are not subject to HIPAA or required by law to maintain client confidentiality. According to data, 71% of CPCs, that's crisis pregnancy centres, use deceptive means such as spreading thoroughly debunked misinformation, and 38% do not clearly state on their homepage that they do not provide abortion care. The website goes on to say these methods make it harder for people to get reliable information about an important decision that will affect their health and their lives. By using deception, delay tactics, and disinformation, CPC staffs undermine the tenets of informed consent and patient autonomy and impede access to comprehensive, ethical care. They list tactics that crisis pregnancy centres use as including asserting false risks of abortion, such as stating that there are links between abortion and breast cancer, infertility, mental illness, and preterm birth, falsely suggesting a high complication rate associated with abortion, intentionally overestimating a person's gestational age and suggesting that they are beyond local legal limits for accessing abortion, using disturbing visuals or performing ultrasounds to emotionally manipulate and shame pregnant people under the guise of informing or diagnosing them, and downplaying the impact of pregnancy and childbirth on people's lives and health, and many, many more tactics. And these are actually also in the UK too. The British Pregnancy Advisory Service states that there are 21 crisis pregnancy centres in the UK providing misleading medical information and or unethical advice about abortion. Some of the misleading claims that they've told people include spreading the lie that having a termination could lead to post-abortion syndrome, a mental health condition likened to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not recognised by the NHS. And they even go as far as to tell women that if they have an abortion, they could, and I quote, experience hallucinations involving babies crying and having nightmares of something happening to a child. These centres are simply made to scare women and pregnant people into submission, not to actually look after them. The AMA Journal of Ethics published an article in 2018 titled Why crisis pregnancy centres are legal but unethical, which warns that because centres are sometimes located close to abortion clinics and have names and logos similar to nearby abortion clinics, women could mistakenly seek care there rather than at the intended clinic. They also seek to target women who are most likely to seek an abortion, particularly low-income women and women of colour. These strategic practices appear to be designed to mislead abortion clinic clients. They go on to say that despite looking like legitimate clinics, most CPCs are not licensed and their staff are not licensed medical professionals. The article goes on to warn that perhaps most worrisome, regardless of whether a particular location is licensed, CPCs engage in counselling that is misleading or false. Despite claims to the contrary, these centres do not meet the standard of patient-centred quality medical care. The counselling provided abortion and contraception by CPCs falls outside accepted medical standards and guidelines, providing evidence-based information and treatment options. Similarly, centres cite debunked literature showing an association between abortion and breast cancer. Although abortion has been shown to be safer than childbirth, it is portrayed as a dangerous or even deadly procedure. By offering the illusion of choice but not actually providing accurate information, and in many cases just straight up lying to these women who are trying to already make a difficult choice, they are taking away a person's right to make an informed decision about what happens to them and their bodies, and sometimes they stop women getting actual healthcare that they need before it's too late. Often what they do to these women can be emotionally traumatizing for the women who go there. This is clearly stated in the article from the AMA Journal of Ethics, which says, from a public health standpoint, these centres endanger women by misinterpreting and misrepresenting medical evidence. I can find absolutely no evidence of them providing any real support for mothers or children after the child is born either. No evidence of real financial support for the family for the next 18 years, which is what it's going to be. No evidence of really helping with childcare, no access to real proper counselling for the person. A few articles and sources I found suggest that some crisis pregnancy centres offer some limited supplies to new mothers, new parents, but it all comes with strings attached. For example, one article from Vox stated that some resources came with strings attached. Free baby clothes and other supplies, for example, were only available if patients took workshops or classes, some of which had a religious component. Some women found the required instruction troubling, with one saying of a parenting video, "It hurt me." The article goes on to talk about one study that was done and saying, for the patients Kimport talked to, going to such a centre didn't meet all of their needs. She said it didn't even meet most of their needs. While their services may not cost money, they're not necessarily free, said Andrea Schwartzendruber, an assistant professor of epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of Georgia, who studies centres. She says they cost people's time and energy. And once they had attended classes, again usually with a forced religious component, the women were not always able to choose what items they received. In general, the products women reported getting were relatively minor, like prenatal vitamins, a water bottle, or baby clothes. So obviously, let's be real here, not everything crisis pregnancy centres do is bad, but it's safe to say that the harm they do far outweighs the benefits. And to legitimately claim these centres will solve all problems of people who don't want to be pregnant or offer real life-changing support is an outright lie. Lauren, of course, doesn't mention any of this. She makes it sound like they actually help people and just leaves out all of the harm they do. I'm not sure if it's because she hasn't researched this properly or because she's got this, anti-choice agenda. It's hard to say.
Basically, crisis pregnancy centers aim to be there for women who are going through an unplanned pregnancy, i.e. totally debunking the lie that pro-life people don't care about women.
Again, Lauren isn't using any words she understands. The existence of crisis pregnancy centers doesn't debunk anything. They do not actually care about women. They do not care about women's actual health or bodily autonomy or freedom to choose. They do not care about actually allowing women and pregnant people to make informed decisions. They do not actually care about the health or well-being of newborn babies unless they can leverage that in order to indoctrinate vulnerable new parents and their kids. That was a bit of a mouthful. The resources they actually provide are minimal and come, as we've said, with many strings attached, and none of this takes into account the needs of people who simply do not want to be pregnant or give birth or cannot for health reasons. Crisis pregnancy centres care about their own agenda, not the individuals or newborn babies they claim to help.
And for that, of course, the left hates crisis pregnancy centers.
No, we hate them for the harm they do, the lack of real medical care, the misinformation being spread, the lack of bodily autonomy they force on pregnant people, and so much more. You're talking out of your bum, Lauren. If we care about the well-being of women and children, and you're saying this actually helps women and children, why would we hate it? There is no logic to even your lies.
They like to allege that crisis pregnancy centers lie to women, even though I haven't really seen any evidence of that.
Yeah, you might not have seen evidence of that, but I have. Many of us have. There are a ton of studies on it. There are recordings, video and audio recordings of these lies and misinformation being told. There are newspaper articles. There is a BBC documentary about it. Just because you are willfully ignorant and didn't bother to research this before talking about it on your channel, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This information has been out there and available for a very long time. That said, what bothers me most about this is I just get the impression that she knows she's lying. I might be autistic and not really very good at reading facial expressions and cues and stuff, but even I can see that awkward half laugh she does here and know that means that she knows she's lying, right? I'm not misreading that, am I? It feels like she's willfully spreading misinformation that harms people because it suits her agenda, and I just can never be okay with that.
And actually, some pro-choice groups go as far as to target and threaten crisis pregnancy centers because how dare you try to give women a choice other than abortion?
Actually, no. Pro-choice centers are the ones giving women choice. And the only reason we want crisis pregnancy centers shut down is because of the harm they do. When you go to an abortion clinic, they aren't just trying to force an abortion on you. They actually give you all the options and say, hey, you know what? If you change your mind, here's what's available to you. Here are your other options. Make the best decision for you, but we're here if this is the choice you want. Being pro-choice does not mean we want to force abortions on people. That's a stupid argument. The rest of this video is a bunch of stupid stuff about Lauren not understanding the difference between women being able to dress for themselves and being objectified by men without their consent. I'm tired of Lauren now, so we're going to skip this topic. And this is where I pretty much gave up on my script. I'm getting very, very tired now. I don't know if you're picking up on this. I feel I'm slurring my words a lot. It's late at night. I'm getting tired. I was going to respond to way more of Lauren's videos, but I don't think I realised just how ignorant she was. Also, Kuvi is so ready for bed, aren't you, baby? You coming to have a little grumble at me? I got you, Piglet. This has ended up being a far longer video than I expected this to be, so this is where I'm going to end this today. Like I say, I have quite a few more videos of hers I was planning to respond to, so if there's something you'd like to see, please let me know down in the comments. And I will say that if by some chance Lauren... Kuvi bear! If by some chance Lauren watches this video and has a problem with it, I'd just like to leave her own words with her.
And you know what? For some people, perhaps all of their ideas are bad, and I'm sorry, but we can't just say nothing about it because we're worried about your mental health. Like, if you say something dumb as an adult, you should be ready to be criticized for it. It's like, I understand not loving criticism, even if it's constructive. It can be tough to deal with sometimes, the fact that maybe you could be doing something better, or that you've made a mistake, or that you're not the greatest at something. But the adult response to that is to take it in stride, to try and learn from people's input, not to form an entire socio-political movement around not wanting to hear how you could improve yourself.
Good girl. Mwah. But for now, thank you so much for watching our video. Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. And then snacks. Send me all the snacks. Send me all the snacks in the world. And cheese, and ball, and send some snuggles. And I'll send kisses and cute faces back. Look at me. You're such a good girl. Surprised you haven't been all like, Missy, come play with me. Get into bed. Actually, you have been this last 5 minutes, haven't you? But that's okay, baby bear. That's okay. Anyway, sorry. Getting carried away with my little pickle. Where were we? Right, yes. Oh, you're going down, babes. Go on. Good girl. Point is, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for sticking with me through this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. I know I got a little bit emotional at times, but I hope that wasn't too bad. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you did like this, it would be wonderful if you want to leave a like, give it a little share on social media if you think other people would like it, leave a comment because that really helps with engagement and everything like that. If you like my videos, you can go check out my second channel as well, where I do more casual content. I just did like a little book haul over there. Did a makeup video the other day. I put some old art videos on there and stuff like that. That's really fun. And yeah, if you'd like to support my channel and my work, I also have a Patreon you can go and check out as well. And like I say, at the higher tiers, you get these exclusive stickers and prints sent out to you like every 3 months, which is quite cool. It's, oh baby, oh, you big yawn. It's all stuff that I've designed myself, or photographed myself, or drawn myself, or painted myself and stuff like that. So it's all very personal. It's like you're getting a little piece of me, you know? And yeah, I think that's all the admin stuff done. I'm not very good at this, am I? I'm trying to do more of this like self-promote-y bit this year because I feel like I normally don't, and I'm still not very good at it. But yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. I cannot wait to read your comments, and I will see you all again very, very soon. And you, young lady, would you like to get to beddy boys? Do you want to go to bed? Is it bedtime? Oh, yes. We'll see you later. Bye.